Committee Room 29, sound. 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 Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound.
I put him as an apology? Yeah. Is she live now?
Okay, thank you, Clerk, and thank you, members. Agus Tommy McAuley, agus Fáilte Road. You're all very, very welcome to this morning's 67th meeting of the Committee for Communities. We have a quorum, and I now call the meeting to order. Can I remind anyone there in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices, however, can be used through a Wi-Fi connection. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network, and no recordings or photographs may be taken. Can I remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly in a way which does not interfere with the proceedings, and be aware of sensitivity of microphones as well as cameras when using the tablet throughout the course of the meeting. For any members joining via Zoom, can I ask you to be mindful of whether the camera on your device is able to pick up any other people or images in the background which you may not wish to be seen. So, agenda item 1 then, members, declaration of interest. I would remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. Does any member have any interest to declare in relation to today's agenda items? Andy?
Charity trustee, chair and private sector landlord.
Yeah. Kelly?
Member of the deaf community.
Thank you.
Charity trustee as well.
Yeah. I'm also a charity trustee. I own a property from which I gain rental income, and I'm taking a member's bill in relation to homelessness. Okay, thank you, members. Moving on then to apologies. Are members aware of any apologies today?
Morris's.
Morris, thank you, Pam.
Shan will be just slightly late today.
Okay, thank you. Clerk, any other? Okay. Okay, members, chairperson's business. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of you who were able to attend our meeting last week in the Skianos Centre. I thought it was an excellent and very informative meeting, and I would like to thank the Skianos Centre again for hosting us. Any comment members wish to make in relation to that? I thought a very good, focused, dedicated meeting on the issue of homelessness, and really expert panels attending. So, Andy?
Yeah, just to re-emphasise, I know it was discussed on the day, that model that FTC can be utilised to deliver alternative forms of housing, and I know and it's repeatedly being stated by the Finance Minister, the Department should look at how they can avail of FTC, and I think again we're in that space where there's some FTC left in this financial year, so I think the Department and every department should be looking at how they can utilise FTC, and not least, you know, later on today we're going to be discussing social housing funding, not least in the current climate when we have so many challenges. We should be leveraging this experience that could be replicated right across Northern Ireland.
Yeah, no, I think there were several good mentions, that community led and that stepped kind of approach to empowering people to make their way back to it was really useful, and we have agreed that we will draw that into a report, and that then will be available in terms of our advisory role to the department, that we can provide that information. So thank you for that, and thank you again to Skianos Centre. Members, you will be aware then on Tuesday the Minister delivered a statement in plenary on the publication of the draft disability strategy for consultation. I'm sure members agree that it's welcome publication, and we can await with interest what the consultation yields, and I note there's a lively debate has begun already, and that's to be welcome. A full copy of the Minister's statement and a press release can be found at item 6.19 and 6.20. Also, members, the Minister for Finance delivered a welcome statement in plenary on Tuesday in terms of the December 2025-26 monitoring round. That can be found at item 6.22 of the tabled correspondence, and I think it is. I was extremely pleased to see that the Minister's bids have now been met in full in terms of his bids around housing for this year, and that will increase the potential starts for social housing. I think that's really important. Yeah,
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we could check with the department the announcement on the additional housing payment. We know that from the 1st of December this year that there has been that change to social housing funding and that reduction in funding. Given that this was part of monitoring round money for the 25-26 period, any of that money, is that going to be affected by the 1st of December change or not?
Yeah,
Be affected by the 1st of December change.
The social housing, the housing association grant. Yeah.
The HA grant. Okay.
and I'm very conscious we do have officials coming today on that issue, so that's timely, and I have a few questions around that myself. Okay, members, finally then, for those of you who are participating in the visit to the Oireachtas next week, a draft agenda is contained at page 4 of the table of papers. The committee team will be finalising travel arrangements in the coming days, and an information pack will be sent to all members in advance of Wednesday. So can I ask all members who intend to participate in the visit and haven't yet indicated to please indicate to the team by close of play tomorrow. Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to draft minute then, members, which are contained at pages 7 and 10 of the meeting pack. So we're dealing with 2 minutes today. The meeting's on the 2nd of December and the 4th of December. We did that additional meeting in relation to the sign language bill. Do members have any edits or amendments to either set of draft minutes? Are members therefore content to agree that the minutes of 2nd December and 4th of December as drafted are an accurate record of those meetings?
Yeah.
Content. Thank you, members. Moving on then to agenda item 5, members, matters arising. You've been provided with a summary table of matters arising at page 22. We've received responses from the department on a few important matters. So can I ask members then to highlight or draw out any comments or wish to seek briefings on relation to items 5.2 to 5.7. And just before I come to members, there are a couple that I want to flag up. Item 5.3 is a response from the Department of Finance in relation to cross-departmental briefing on retrofitting and future-proofing homes. Item 5.4 similarly is a response from the Department for the Economy in relation to cross-departmental work and retrofitting and future-proofing. The committee team will continue to work with DALOs to identify the relevant cross-departmental group of officials to brief this committee on this subject and a suitable date for that to happen. It's on this one, Andy, is it?
No, it's 5.7.
Okay, well, just give me a second then. I want to work my way through a couple and then I'll come back. 5.5 is a response from the Department of Finance regarding its review of arm's length bodies. The response sets out the terms of reference for the DOF review and confirms that these do not extend to engaging directly with ALBs of the DFC in relation to their views and experiences of the arrangements. Do members want to make any comment in relation to that response? Content, okay. 5.6 then is a request from the Department for Communities to supply the details of the query that the committee sent to councils and any responses the committee has received in relation to the future proofing of homes. Are members content for that information to be supplied to the department? Yeah. Okay, members, Andy then, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair, it's just obviously welcome progress on the help with healthcare costs. I know it's something the committee and indeed myself and Kelly have focused on for some time. I must say long overdue that this change has been put through, but I am slightly concerned around the forward planning of it and the communication piece, and maybe if we can just ask the department, are they intending to proactively communicate this within UC journals, for example, that individuals know that when they're going to avail of dental or optical care that they need to take along the corresponding statement, or is that going to be an expectation that all of the practitioners will have to make sure that individuals are turning up with this information? Because the last thing we want to do is creating any barriers where somebody turns up, if they don't have the information required, that their appointment has to be postponed or they have to go away, because not everybody is able to get or access their statements on their phones. So it's just important that people are aware of the obligations for them to avail of the help with healthcare.
Yeah, I think that's very sensible. Members content?
Yep.
Clerk, happy enough?
Yeah, and that's to the Department for Communities specifically. Do you want to copy the health response to them and explain that a digital proof is required?
I think what was it they said in the response? Was it
Copy of the statement or
So they could, in
award,
theory,
yeah.
provide it on their phone, but obviously not everybody, or a tablet, not everybody will be able to do that. So it's that communication piece. I think, obviously, we're often missing the opportunity within the UC journal to communicate with people. And, you know, if that can be put within there, I know it has been stated before, it's difficult to get changes without DWP approval, but we're following the GB model. So this is UK-wide, so there's no reason why DSC can't be pushing to have it put on there, you know, front and centre, help with healthcare costs, and this is what you require, just to try and signpost people. But that comms piece is really important.
Yep. Members content, Kelly?
I was just going to say, just to confirm what Andy is saying there, I've already had a number of people contact my office, very unclear as and still looking for an HC1 form to be filled out because they're so uncertain of how they can prove that they're on universal credit. The other thing that I'm a bit concerned about with this is that if someone applies and they say someone's on universal credit but they do have income coming in, and if, say for instance, especially when you think about December and the next few months, if they receive a pay increase, or not that it happens very often now, a December bonus, that could push them above the threshold. And if they have eyesight tests, hearing tests, dental treatment during the period of time when they're above the income level, then they will have to pay for that. But it's very unclear at the minute how this all happens. You know, is it a case then that the claim from whoever, the dentist, whatever goes through, then DFC find out that the person wasn't able to actually have the free access at that period of time? When does the bill come through? So it would be very useful if Department for Communities could lay out even like a linear process of how this all works, because I'm having difficulty getting that, and if I'm having difficulty, I can only imagine how hard it is for other people to get access to information. But as Andy has said, there does need to be public information about this. People do need to know, and to be honest, this time of the year I would welcome more people getting their eyes tested simply for road safety, making sure that drivers are not out in the road not able to see. And this is the sort of thing that Department of Communities and Health should be working together to promote.
Just further to that, Chair, my understanding of it is that it's during that corresponding statement period, if the individual has the earnings above the threshold, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it's laid down in the regulations, then they're not entitled during that corresponding period. But it'd be good to get clarity of that, so that individuals are aware and they're fully cognizant of the fact if their earnings are above the threshold in that corresponding statement period, that they may then be required to pay it. But if that does then go through, they could be, as we've often seen, by BSO for an overpayment of help with healthcare. So again, although it's been resolved by virtue of the automatic entitlement, there's still a lot of confusion and uncertainty out there, and I think the departments need to be a bit more proactive, both health and communities.
Yep, I agree with that, Kelly.
If he's 5.3.
Are you content with the details?
Yes,
And
yes,
members are content, so go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, frog in my throat just at the wrong time. 5.3 and 5.4, very, very welcome. Both the Department of Finance and the Department of Economy's comments regarding what they're doing in the background with regards to retrofitting. I'm a little bit concerned that this fragmented approach, now I appreciate Department of Finance talks about a cross-departmental coordination happening with regards to that, but we don't actually have a very clear retrofitting strategy for Northern Ireland. The Department of the Economy, when it talks there about the Sustainable Energy Programme, why are we doing this? It needs to be clearer why we're doing this. Is this part of an overall retrofitting strategy? Whenever I was down looking at the strategy that's used in the south, they made sure that something like our Sustainable Energy Programme was part of a wider piece. So if you'd had roof insulation done or wall cavity insulation done, then that then would lead on to an expectation that in the future you'll consider getting your windows done. And there's a theme and a programme of how to do this. At the moment we're just keeping doing the same things over and over again. How do we know how many houses have been done? What percentage of households in Northern Ireland have benefited from that? Why are others not taking it up? So I think there needs to be a question there back to the Department for Communities. While Department of Finance and Department of Economy are obviously playing their role in the parts that cover them, what the department's retrofit strategy. We can't leave it with the housing executive because they're only looking at their own homes. We need to consider all tenures. So it's back to that. And if the Department for Communities are saying that while they have the remit for housing, if they're limiting to social housing, then what are we doing about all the private renters and the private homeowners? There needs to be a very clear way forward for Northern Ireland, a plan that actually means that all of these things link up together.
So right to the department asking for how they're planning to pull this all together across all tenures, yes, across all housing types.
Because retrofitting was mentioned in the housing supply strategy, but we haven't got a retrofitting strategy for Northern Ireland, which would have to be all tenures.
I think that would be useful. Members content with that? Yeah. Okay, members, can I then move on to items 5.7 to 5.13? And if I can just, so we've already dealt with that 5.7, I think, fairly extensively. 5.8 then is a full evaluation report published by East Belfast Mission and Commonwealth following the committee meeting in Skenos last week. 5.9 is response from the department regarding the football fund and the delay in responding to the committee's request for information. Do members have any comments in relation to any of those items? Yes, Kelly?
5.9, the football fund. We go back to the department and ask them what proof they have that there's ongoing legal action, because there isn't. What we know is that having a notice that somebody intends to take legal action is not legal action, and it's just to ask them what proof that they have that there is actual legal action.
Members content? Yeah. Okay. Okay, 5.10 is a response from the department in relation to the committee's request for information on targets and funding allocations for interventions contributed to the executive's anti-poverty strategy from other strategies. Any comments in relation to 5.10 there, members?
This is a difficult one, but without those targets we don't know how much influence or how much has been applied for by the department for child poverty actions, to achieve those targets in the multi-year budget. I know that we'll have a ministerial briefing. Maybe we can highlight that too when we're getting our next briefing, just to say that we need to find out how this cross-departmental consideration of child poverty is taking place, and given the fact that Communities is the lead department on this, how they will report all of this back to us. Will they ensure that we get all of the details of all the other departments and what they're doing?
Yeah. Members content? Okay, then within that group, members, 5.11 is also there in relation to the a response from the department in relation to the ministerial briefing which took place on 23rd of October. The response details information on the priority need policy in regard to refugees and migrants, the soccer funding, the Irish Language Co-Design Group, a definitive timeline for the Irish Language Strategy, whether the 6 to 7 month timescale provided by a senior official for a draft of the Irish Language Strategy also applies to the anti-poverty strategy, and what good relations guidance is the department arm's length bodies such as Art Council expected to apply in relation to providing funding support for projects and programmes. Members, any comments in relation to any of that?
Chair, just see this definition of priority need. How many years have we been talking about what priority need is? How are we going to, like for instance, there's a review by the Housing Executive onto the priority, allocations in housing. But if we don't have a definition of priority need, how can we do this? We need to get the department to really define
what they're using as priority need.
Because otherwise it makes our role here very difficult. How can we tell that priority need is being met? I think we need to go back to the department and just say that their guidance is out of date now. We need to make sure that this is effective because it's not just Communities that will be looking at this, it's all departments that will be looking at this. So we need to get that guidance updated.
Yeah, members content that we seek the further detail on how the department defines priority need.
Is it the department, the Housing Executive, Chair? and my understanding is it is defined in their guidance document. We may not all be satisfied with the definitions, but it's laid down within the guidance document. I think that NIHE previously sent to us, obviously the various tests that they will apply to an individual's circumstances as to whether they are deemed to be in priority need for housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my concern on that is the housing executive deciding that, not the department. And while the housing executive have that role, they're not doing too much when it comes to priority need for private renters. So I think we need to have a government definition of what priority need is, and for all arm's length bodies then to have to take that forward. For instance, I asked, Andy, I've asked, when you look at that priority need document, there's no mention of veterans.
No, because veterans are specifically, well, veterans, obviously this is a wider issue. Service leavers are captured within the definition of the current document, where if they're leaving service accommodation, they're entitled to other homelessness points, which is 50, but the priority need captured within that document around, if there's a disablement, children, etc. I can't remember it all off the top of my head, but it is categorised. But I do take your point that you're making around the department setting that, but I imagine that they'll probably defer to the housing executive when it comes specifically to housing. But if you're looking at a wider priority need definition,
well, that's it. So when any funding comes forward, if it mentions priority need, if they're going to use the housing executive's definition, it may not always apply in the funding. So I think we need the department really to step up and give us that definition, and an updated one, taking into considerations, discussions around the executive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's actually probably part of a wider consideration around that whole issue of need and allocation and all that, which maybe is something that we will need to take a look at some point. But members content for now, or is there anything particular members want to seek? Okay. Also in 5.11 there around the definitive timeline for the Irish language strategy, and this kind of overlaps into the 6 to 7 month time scale on the strategy and the anti-poverty strategy. A lot of this is being left to the vagaries of what other departments decide to do, and I just wonder why the Department for Communities couldn't put in place a time frame for those work to be completed, which would then feed into the wider time frame. So I think it's something that leaves it very, very difficult to scrutinise or know when to expect any of these strategies. I mean, if you just give it to other departments and say, come back to us when you can, I don't think that's overly urgent approach. I think it would be better if timelines were agreed with other departments, and then that could feed into the wider. So if members are content, I would be suggesting we write back to the department asking that they ask those other departments for timeframes, or put timeframes on them themselves if they think that's.
Chair, we're coming up to probably quite a difficult time within the department. As we know, the Permanent Secretary, Colin Boyle, is retiring or has just retired, and I wish him very well with that. But we haven't heard any replacement there, so we're at a situation where a lot of those leaders are coming out of that. The people who have the ability and the power to be able to cross departmental. I'm a bit concerned that we'll see further slippage on some of these things. It feels like we're in a pre-election period where everybody's starting to kick cans down the road. My fear is now that if we have new people to learn expertise, to build up their skills base, that this is further going to be delayed. So yeah, I think it is right what you've just said. We do need to push on this.
Well, would members then agree we ask the department what their expectation is of the cross-departmental working group in terms of completing that part of the work, and then we can take it from there to focus at least a piece on that. Okay.
What the expectation is
from the department for the CDWG to complete its work programme. Okay, members then just so checking then for any other comment in relation to that block of 5.7 to 5.13. Members otherwise content as noted in the memo. Sorry, another one I need to flag up is 5.12, which is a response from the department in relation to the fraud and error recovery bill in the task and finish group briefing held on 20th November. And 5.13 is a response from the department relating to the fraud and error bill, but it includes information on the timeline of the bill. Any comments in relation to that item, members? No. Finally, item 5.15 then is in table papers, and that's a response from the department to the committee's request for further information following the recent department briefing on the Community Infrastructure Fund. Any comment in relation to that one, members? Go ahead, Kelly.
It's a wee bit jobs for the boys. The allocation of funding, irrespective of who the organisation is, the amount of money that's being paid to process that, there will have been other organisations who could have carried out this work, but it seems to be that if you're in the know, then you get awarded quite a substantial administrative fee to handle this grant. Not best pleased actually with the department's approach on this. I don't think it's as transparent as it should be. And while they seem to have been said that uncompeted grants are able to be made where there's substantial evidence to support the decision not to offer a competitive application scheme, makes me think why, what evidence was provided that led to the decision that they didn't need to have a competitive application scheme. This was a grant that's covering administration work over a 3-year period. It's not a small amount of money, and while it's not coming out of the actual grant that's being paid out to the Community Infrastructure Fund recipients, it's still quite an amount of money. I think maybe I'm coming just from a personal perspective as well. Having worked in the community and voluntary sector and bid for these types of grants, there are plenty of organisations out there who can do this work. And we don't know if they would have been cheaper or more expensive than the offer that was made without any competition. So I just wonder if we could ask then, on the basis of the Department for Communities asked the Commercial Services branch, and the Commercial Services branch said where there is substantial evidence to support the decision not to offer a competitive application scheme, we asked what that substantial evidence was. And it has to be more than we knew them anyway. So if we could ask for that substantial evidence. We're a scrutiny committee, we have to make sure that public money is being spent effectively. I have no issues about the organisation who's doing it. I have issues about the allocation and how the department decided to not use a competitive route for this.
Okay, members content we seek that information? Yep,
Right.
Thank you, members. Okay, thank you, members. So, members are always content with the as noted in the memo. Yes.
Sorry, can I just go? You went over it very quickly. The fraud and error. I don't remember which number it was at.
5.12 and 5.13.
Yes, thank you. It's just to ask: are we factoring in possible scrutiny time in terms of our forward work programme?
Well, we're factoring in everything that we've been advised, really,
Yes.
and this is included in what we've been advised is potentially coming forward. And I do have to express just a general concern, a lot of this is not coming forward, even by the department's recommendations at stage to April, and that's going to create significant issues with a number of bills, but we are factoring in at this point.
Okay, that's grand.
Is there something we need to do here as a committee just to put a bit of a shot across the bow of the department to say, committee is entitled to time to do scrutiny, and to be honest, if we run out of time in this mandate because they're coming at us so late, then we run out of time in this mandate. So it's in their interest to get information to the committee as soon as possible. Because to be honest, they are.
I think it is a concern, and if committee wanted to express that general concern, I think that would be appropriate, I have to say, because there's quite a bit potentially coming at us. So that's a valid concern and will become a real issue. So I'd be certainly content, our members content that we...
Chair, I'm fine with that. I'm just wondering, can we go one above that as well? Because clearly the Minister's saying there's an issue getting this onto the agenda, executive, to free it up to come back to committee. So can we write to FMDFM on it?
In general terms, happy to write to OFMDFM, but I'm not entirely convinced that the timeline is linked to that issue in relation to the fraud and error. I got a sense from the officials when we were speaking here, there's a lot of work ongoing still on the bill. So I'm not, I don't know if the two issues are linked, but I'm quite happy to include that letter to the Executive Office as well.
Can I just clarify? So after the committee received its pre-legislative briefing, committee agreed a number of actions, and one of those was to write to the head of the civil service to flag that we had been advised that bill would not come before around May time, and committee noted its concern then that that allowed less than a year. So that letter has gone to the head of the civil service. It hasn't gone to FM and DFM. We can write to TO if committee wishes to copy that letter to them.
Yeah.
Because we were concerned at that point.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate. I mean, it's my understanding that the Minister of Communities is saying that he's trying to get this paper through the executive and it hasn't been out on the agenda. So I think it would be appropriate to try to DFM and ask around that, and in terms of so this committee can continue with its work and can forward work.
And that's notwithstanding concerns the committee may have around the bill itself, but that's understandable enough. Did we copy the letter that we sent to the head of civil service to the Department for Communities? And if we're copying now to TEO, should we?
We wrote separately from memory, and I'll double check this, we wrote separately to the department to flag our concern around that and the time frame, adequate time frame for scrutiny.
Okay, so
I'm getting nods, so I think we wrote separately.
So can I suggest that when we see the response back to that what has been sent already, that we then follow up again?
Yeah. We changed standing orders so that within 4 weeks of return after the summer recess, I think it's 4 weeks, I was trying to remember there, that the First Minister and Deputy First Minister is supposed to have come to the House to outline the expected pieces of legislation that are coming forward from all departments. Half of the stuff that we're seeing wasn't on the list. So is it time maybe that we wrote to the Executive Committee to ask them to seek clarification of when their department looks at what pieces of legislation are coming forward, so it will be added into that debate in late September or early October? Because if we don't fly that up now, we're going to be left in this committee with private members' bills and legislation hitting us from the department all over the show, and it'll be very difficult for us to fulfil our duties and meet deadlines.
Yeah, I am concerned about that. Are members content that we write to the Executive Committee in that sense? And Clerk, are you content with the...
Yes, can I confirm, are we writing to FM and DFM?
Yeah.
Oh, aye.
Flagging concerns for adequate time for committee to scrutinise the fraud and error recovery bill?
All bills. All bills, I think.
It's also part of our role as support of the Minister. Why wouldn't we do that? But I think it's for the Executive Committees a separate one. If they could actually, as part of their work, look at the processes for that new standing order and whether DFM or FM and DFM are getting how they get the information from all the committees for that debate.
And I think, Chair, just in terms of, yes, all bills, absolutely, but in terms of fraud and error, I think with the risk of financial penalties coming, we know how constrained we are in terms of finances. So any revenue stream coming in, and certainly want to avoid penalties coming from Westminster on any of these things. So I think given the importance of all that and the fiscal situation that we're in, we need to see this been given as much time as possible to scrutinise and process. So I think it is important that we do have that raised as high up as possible. It needs to be given priority, and we've all been there before when time runs out very quickly in this place and we do get an onslaught of legislation, and then and I certainly remember previous mandate where we had so much, went through an awful lot of legislation in terms of health. And it does feel quite overwhelming, and there is the concern then that you're not giving it the proper scrutiny that is required, because it's physically very difficult to process an awful lot.
Yeah, and there are question marks around how much of it's error and how much of it's fraud, and also how much of it's inflation. But also, it has to be said, as of the last time that it was asked in committee here around how much we could expect to get back, at this point in time that still remains zero. I know there's a conversation, the Minister's flagged that, but there's nothing guaranteed in relation to that. So it's not money that's guaranteed at this point. However, as the conversation unfolds, that may change. But at this point in time, we've been told that there's no guarantee of any money.
I think, Chair, we need to look at it. It needs to come to committee.
Can I just ask, Chair, on this one, could we ask department who has said that they'll be penalised? And can we get
That's
details
on
on
the penalty
that?
side of it.
Yeah, it's just with regards to fraud and error, can we get a copy or an outline, a summary even of where that penalties risk is coming from?
We've already asked for the level of penalty, haven't we?
Yeah, we have asked questions on that, and
During the briefings, it was
set out in
raised
the
as
briefing.
it could be if we break parity.
Yeah, it's just I wouldn't mind knowing what our penalties look, what it looks like, who it's coming from, the amount. So if we get
We've
that
asked for clarification in terms of the quantum of the penalties and what they would look like, and the communication that came from the department clearly set that out, and it's my understanding of that communication that was from DWP and Treasury, that there would be implications for the block grant.
Okay, we'll await that response with interest as well, but members content for now to be right to the Executive Office in relation to our concerns
And
and
FMDFM.
pardon.
And FMDFM.
And FMDFM, 2 letters, yeah.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on then to correspondence, which is agenda item 6, and we will proceed through the correspondence as usual by numbered bundles. Members can indicate if they wish to draw out, highlight or comment on any of those. So do members have any comments on 6.2 to 6.8, or sorry, 6.2 to 6.6? And just in relation to 6.2, that's an update from the department on DWP's independent review of carers allowance overpayments. So any comments 6.2 to 6.6, members? Or are members content with the correspondence? I think members are broadly content. Yeah, thank you. Item 6.7 to 6.12, and within that bundle 6.11 is a policy brief from PPR on both the cumulative and potential impacts of the fundamental review of allocations of social housing for the attention of members of the Communities Committee. Do members have any comment in relation to that item? I think there is a concern around that, and I know we're doing a session here where we will have officials that we can ask some questions of, and I think that's something that I would share a bit of a concern on, and we can out in that sense. Any other issues, members? And then 6.12, I'll also flag up as correspondence from an individual in relation to the sign language bill. The individual has requested that the comments be treated as confidential, so members please bear this in mind, and we are including that information as part of our report. So Andy, were you looking in it?
I just wanted to quickly come in on the PPR letter, the one in particular around no detriment rule, and if maybe we could engage with NIHE. I understand what's trying to be achieved and the policy intent behind this, but I have a significant concern where individuals have been awarded points. Clearly in Northern Ireland, we're not in a position to be able to deliver the housing at a scale which recognises the points that they've been awarded. So if we then bring this no detriment in, where if their circumstances change and after a prescribed period of time their points could be reassessed, which is currently not the case, because Northern Ireland hasn't been able to kick in quick enough to provide the housing that matches their points level at that time, they could be unduly penalised. So I think we need to obviously look at that in the round and just maybe seek some more clarity from NIHE. When do they anticipate this coming in and the impact of that? I think for me a lot of this is tinkering around the edges of the social security system and the statistics, but in reality we're still going to have the same fundamental problems. People cannot get homes because we're not building enough.
Yeah, members content? Yeah.
We're asking the NIHE when do they anticipate this commencing?
Yeah, the no detriment clause there.
The no detriment clause, yeah.
Rule.
Yeah, content, members, thank you.
Can I check just on 6.15? Do we have Joseph Roundtree?
So I'm just coming to that block.
Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly. So we're on 6.7 to 6.12. Yeah, Kelly.
612. This isn't the first time we've heard issues with this course. Obviously, keeping the confidentiality in mind, it might be very easy to identify the individual, but I know that in the sign language bill, it will be by regulation that the qualifications will be decided in partnership with the deaf community. But I'm just wondering if we can redact the individual's information and forward that on to the sign language team within the department, just to say that when they are considering the regulations, that there has to be a review of the course content, and for them to bring this up as part of the work that they're doing with the deaf community when deciding those qualification levels, because this course sounds like it's a wishy-washy, not really achieving what interpreters require.
Any issue with that, Clerk, that you, in terms of, I would have no issue?
Just to flag it to the department so that when they are coming to the regulation phase, that they consider that.
Will we forward both?
Not part of the committee's report or separately. There'll be officials here later today.
We can bring it up to them, but I think it would need to be as part of our report to really spell out that we need, when regulations are coming forward, that devolved responsibility, that they have to do a review of the existing courses by, talking to people who are on or have gone through that course, because it really doesn't appear to be delivering what was expected.
And can we check whether the deaf community is involved in even the curriculum setting of those courses? Would that be something that at a point, if they're reviewing it, can we make sure that the deaf community is actually involved in what is being taught? I think that would be very important as well.
Would that be
The report.
right to the institution that's running the course, or to the department, Sian?
I think probably curriculum setting would be with the institution, so whether it's just something that we flag to them, but I think it should be something that's in our report. But I would be happy if we wrote to the institution and just even ask for clarity. Are the deaf community involved? Maybe they are, and we just don't realise that, but would it strengthen the curriculum if they're at the heart of it and actually setting what is what is being looked at, what is being taught within those translator courses?
Members content with Sian's proposal there, and also with Kelly's proposal around the report?
Chair, maybe add the department as well. Do no harm, cover all bases. I think it is important. I think the information should be passed on redacted, obviously, as requested. But I think it's very, very important because it's.
We need to check with the individual. Are they content that gets sent to the department as well?
Even if it's maybe paraphrased,
okay.
Because I think there are some identifying factors even within the narrative that the individual has shared. So maybe it's better if it's just maybe
in a general sense around the issue.
Yeah, rather than sending over the letter just in case there is anything identified within the narrative.
Stories,
Yeah. Members content, and Clerk, are you content with?
It just to raise, I am very concerned. This is the second time that we've had communication about this course, and both people have been fearful of being identified. That doesn't sit well with me. It's either the institution or there's something going on there that has just raised my concerns a bit. Why would individuals who are partaking of a course not feel confident in making a complaint about the content? And it may have, I know that it was indicated in a previous correspondence, it may have a negative impact on their future interpreting roles. I'm a wee bit concerned about that, but that's a heckle for me. But I think we have to give the department its dues. They've said by regulations that they'll be coming forward with the deaf community on interpretation qualifications. I think we just need to flag to them there's obviously an issue going on with existing courses. Let's not have that in the future.
Well, in a general sense, I would be happy with our report including that reference to the fact that institutions must ensure that those participating or contributing do not feel, because any organisation must be able to welcome complaint or feedback in order to improve. So I think it's, in general sense, I think that is an important point. Go ahead, Pam.
Yeah, I think, Chair, it just does underline the vulnerability that the deaf community are under, and it's very apparently real, and their numbers are easily identified. So I think whatever we can do to highlight those issues, we should do. So including a report would be appropriate as well.
Okay, thanks, members. That's useful. Thank you. Okay, members, then moving on to 6.13 to 6.16. Sian.
Yeah, it was just 6.15. Just to check, do we have Joseph Rowntree Foundation? Are they down on our forward work plan?
Yeah.
We have a date, I think 19th of February. I'm just
Great.
double checking.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're trying to associate other briefings for that day, so they all relate.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Item 6.16 corresponds with the department regarding the conversion to new style employment and support allowance. Any comments on that, members? I suppose I'll just make a general comment around there continues to be difficulties with these rollouts and conversions across. And I know the department have engaged quite well with us here, both formally and informally, around that. But we still pick up a lot of, and I would be concerned around, delays and around that issue which has been touched on earlier around uneven income, which is money coming in a lump for farmers or self-employed people. Go ahead, Kelly.
Funny, the mail shot, it says they're issued from the 27th of November. I've already had somebody in my office asking if I could explain what it all means. There doesn't appear to be a recognition that some of the people who are in this group are people who have other difficulties, learning disabilities and so on. There's no easy read versions of this going out. And I just wonder if we could ask the department, of those letters that are going out, particularly to groups of people who are in this group because of disability, are there easy read versions being issued? Because there was no way on this good earth that the person was ever going to understand what was being said in the letter.
Yeah, and funny you should mention that. I learned recently of another case of a similar one where it became very clear during the course of the telephone interview that was an issue. The person doing the assessment requested permission to do a cognitive assessment on the person. The representative from our office who was advising him said, I'm advising him not to do, I'm not sure what status this has, what training you have to do. So I would like actually to ask, are cognitive assessments being carried out by trained and qualified staff? On what circumstances are they being? And it was, the young person actually left the interview at that point. I don't know what has happened since, but it seems to be really...
If they are doing that sort of assessment, Chair, it must be written down of how the assessments measured, the questions, all that. Can we ask for a copy of that?
Yeah, I would like to explore that because it's quite intrusive and...
It's hard enough doing those assessments if you think that somebody's trying to decide whether or not you have X, Y and Z. Sure, it's all on the paperwork.
Yeah.
I think there is maybe, sorry, Chair, potentially even just asking the department how are they ensuring that clear, accessible communication beyond a single mail shot? Are they taking cognizance of the fact that some people will have varying degrees of understanding, particularly of formal language, of and of some of the terminology that's used, and whether, as well, the other thing that I was seeing was that there's more and more pressure put on the independent advice sector at the moment, and I don't think that is being taken into consideration. A lot of people will automatically turn to the independent advice sector rather than make the call because they are fearful of department and fearful of ringing a department number. So I think that something around what communication is being given to the independent advice sector as well, to fully equip them to support people through this rollout, and are they being informed when there are mail shots going out to prepare them for what may be a new kind of onslaught, I suppose, of people contacting them.
Yeah, members content with those various pieces of clarification or...
Do you want me to run
question?
through them? Yeah.
Yes, please do.
Has the department considered easy read versions of the changes for communication? Are cognitive assessments being carried out by staff? And are staff specifically trained to undertake these? What is the process being followed, and can the committee see a copy of that? And what communication is going to the independent sector to fully support people during this rollout?
The easy read one is just, are they doing easy read versions? I know rightly what's going to come back. They'll say, if somebody wishes to request it, they can get an easy read version. That's not what I'm trying to ask. I'm trying to ask is, why don't they do it in an easy read version to begin with?
Okay.
You know, and just have that as standard, because we're getting into the realms of a majority of people here who will have issues and have disabilities. Why don't we just make it easy?
Yeah, it should be standard enough practice.
Make it easier for me anyway, so it would.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, thank you. So, members, anything else then in relation to so in table papers, there's, well, first of all, let me check just in that 6.13 to 6.16 if there's anything else. Otherwise, I'll move on to table papers, which there's some further items there in page 16 of your table papers, and those are items 6.18 to 6.23. So just can I ask if members have any comment they wish to make or draw out any issues in relation to that? Kelly?
No, sorry, no, I'm just giving off at my computer.
Members content then with the correspondence memo in both tabled and main pack, all the way apart from what we've discussed? Okay, thank you. So that completes the correspondence bundle, members, and moving on then to agenda item 7, which is SL1, the housing benefit and universal credit housing costs, executive determinations, modifications, regulations, NI 2026. A copy of this is at SL1 at page 284. The proposed rule, members, will retain local housing allowance rates in 2026-27 at the same cash levels as applied in April 25 for 25-26. For housing benefit, the determination will apply from 1st of April 2026. For universal credit, housing costs from Monday 6th of April 2026. Because this SL1 was received since we last met and is due to come into operation by the end of January, the committee team have asked for officials to be in attendance today for the purpose of responding to any of our scrutiny questions. So can I therefore welcome to the meeting David Tarr, and David is Director of Social Security Policy, Legislation and Decision Making within the Department for Communities. David, I usually remind members about the intent for the proposal based on your letter, but as you're here, I'll hand over to you to take members through the changes this will bring. So I'll now invite you to set out the detail of the proposal before we move to any questions from members. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. So I'll keep this fairly brief. So the proposed statutory rule will provide for local housing allowance rates in 2026-27 to be retained at the same cash levels as applied in April 25 for the current year. I'm sure committee members will be aware, LHA has applied to tenants in the private rented sector since it was introduced in 2008 and is calculated currently using the 30th percentile of private rents for similarly sized houses in a particular broad rental market area. The LHA rates are set by the Housing Executive in January of each year using information collected in the year up to the 30th of September previous, and the LHA rates will apply to people in universal credit and housing benefit. Importantly, really of relevance to this particular statutory rule, so the Chancellor, following the Chancellor's autumn statement on the 26th of November, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions announced that the LHA rates will be frozen for 26-27. So basically that means they will be retained at their current rate levels going forward for the next year. The regulations for Northern Ireland should be operative from the 30th of January in order to maintain parity with DWP. The Housing Executive does currently provide discretionary housing payments, as members will be aware, and that is available for people who can't meet the shortfall if they're affected by the local housing allowance. And if I can just give the committee some figures, because I'm sure members will be interested. At the 26th of November, there were 44,500 universal credit awards for claimants living in private rented accommodation who were subject to the LHA rules. On the 1st of December, the latest information I have from the Housing Executive is there were 9,774 housing benefit awards affected by LHA. And just on the discretionary housing payments, because I'm aware this is of great interest, at November, the Housing Executive advised, based on their latest MI, they had 14,308 applications year to date. 95% of those 13,560 have resulted in an award of DHP. I'm just running through that fairly quickly. In effect, things are going to be frozen for another year. They were frozen a number of years ago, of course, for a period period of years, and then we're uplifted 2 years ago, so we are back into freeze. And happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, David. And I have to say, when the 2025 proposal came before this committee, members expressed concerns at that time about whether the freezing of the LHA rate took account of the reality here in the north, given the shortage of housing. And at that time, we wrote to the Chancellor to highlight our concern. I have to say I am very disappointed that this Labour government appear to be rolling on many of these measures, and it does impact maybe more significantly here than elsewhere. But how does that reality get reflected by yourselves in terms of evidence base to the relevant committee's consideration in Westminster when those proposals are being considered? How does our department engage to raise up that flag or to say, listen, this is having a massive impact?
So what will happen normally is we don't actually feed into Department for Work and Pensions. We had no prior announcement in Department for Communities that this was going to happen. The first detail we get is when the Secretary of State makes his announcement and what the rates were going to be. What will happen here in regards to Northern Ireland, the Social Security Advisory Committee, who I know some members met the chair a few weeks ago, they do take a great interest in local housing allowance in Northern Ireland, and in previous years they have called in our regulations. They do have a scrutiny rule similar to obviously the committee here, and they normally ask us for some evidence on that. So we will really, we haven't got any questions from them yet because the regulations at this stage haven't yet been drafted. In reality, while the Social Security Advisory Committee, similar to yourselves, they can make recommendations, but this is clearly a DWP UK government policy. Whether that will be amended is really a question for Secretary of State. In previous years, I think it's fair to say that there hasn't been any change following any representations from SEC. So I suppose the easiest way of explaining that is we don't necessarily give direct information across the DWP on this, but we will provide it to SEC if they ask for it. We really are in the space of trying to mitigate any fallout from that, which is what we do with discretionary housing payments.
And would there be anything to prevent you from directly making, I know that's the way it's been done traditionally, but given the squeeze that it represents?
No, absolutely not. I suppose the issue for us is knowing what is coming down the line. So we know that there has to be a review of the LHA rates. So I mean, certainly as a department, we can provide information to the Department for Work and Pensions. We can do that formally in advance of them reaching their review. I say that, but that is not routinely done. But that is something the committee thinks would be helpful. I'm quite happy to commit to doing that.
I think it would maybe heighten the awareness that there are different dynamics and different realities here. Thank you, David. Kelly?
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. And thank you for those figures. They're very, very helpful. Can I just add, do you know what the average award is currently being made under discretionary housing
payments? I don't have the average award, I apologise. I would have to get that for you. I do have an idea of the current expenditure, but in total, which I suppose, sorry, I don't have a calculator. I can probably do it very quick and ready.
That was my next
calculation
question
for you.
Was the total award or the total amount of that discretionary housing payment?
So, and I stress this is management information from the Housing Executive, so this is not published data. But the year-to-date spend is 1.94 million, and they have committed for the remainder of the financial year, based on awards that have already been made, to spend a further 1.02 million. So that would be 2.96 million over the year, and that's on the basis of the 13,560 awards they've made.
But we might expect some more people to try to apply into that because the LHA is being frozen. Is that budget doesn't appear to be finite then? There isn't a fixed total max on the Housing Executive?
There is. So the budget allocation for 25-26 is £6.49 million. It is unusual in that it is ring-fenced AMI budget, so it is provided directly by the Treasury.
No, sorry, I meant the discretionary housing payment.
Yes, that's the budget for the discretionary housing payment, 6.49.
Okay. And
it is what's known as ring-fenced AMI. So AMI is, obviously you will be aware, annually managed expenditure is generally met by the Treasury. In this case, they provide this amount, which for this year is the 6.49. means the department can only use it for discretionary housing payments, which we give to the housing executive. Any unspent at the end of the year returns to the Treasury. It is not available for the housing executive of the department.
So this year, for instance, the 2.96 million
Yep.
out of a potential 6.49 million.
Yep.
So there's going to be an underspend there, but
Yes.
we may expect the figures to go up once the LHA is frozen again.
Yes.
The impact of
Yes.
that. Okay.
Yes,
Okay. And
it's
still-
always a demand, as you'll appreciate with being discretionary payments, it's demand led. It fluctuates significantly, I understand.
And it still lasts for 2 years.
It can last for up to 2 years, yes. Yes.
Okay. No, thank you very much. I just wanted to
Yep,
get that
that's
into
fine.
my head. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Mark, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to David. He always has to be the bearer of bad news. It's hard to believe, I suppose, given the context that we've had of the freeze this year and the spiral in rents that we've seen across the place, that there is going to be an underspend of that magnitude. There'll only be, or there'll be less than 50% that would appear of that ring-fenced budget spent, and that kind of begs the question about the use of discretion or the awareness of some people to apply for that discretionary support. What we've come across is people that are moving over to universal credit are actually losing their discretionary housing payment as well, and then have to reapply. But I'm not sure how clear that's being made to claimants. So I'm wondering, maybe the figures that David has kindly provided, maybe as a committee we should be seeking a sort of a further data or detail or breakdown of those. You might be able to map anomalies like that. And I know now, David, like I say, you're just the messenger here, but the policy intent here is to publish this so it allows, let me quote, to allow tenants to plan on the basis of help available. I think, not sure what world we'd be living in as committee members to swallow that. Like, we're seeing an increase in rents, like I said, very limited options mean that the majority of tenants are kind of stuck where they are regardless. And the paper also refers to an ongoing equality screening exercise. Do we know when that will be complete? And I'm thinking particularly of the implications for people who, say, for example, have a disability and that renders them unable to work, and therefore their ability to make up the shortfall is compromised, if not completely non-existent.
Mark. So we normally in my division, we are obviously responsible for drafting the various SRs. The screening will be done during the drafting process. So my team, and I expect if they haven't already started, will very shortly be starting to screen the proposal here. Because it's frozen, we effectively we know what the draft rule. I don't believe we've received a version across from DWP yet, but I haven't been speaking to the team dealing with this in the last couple of days. But normally we will screen as we draft. So when the SR comes to me for clearance finally, as the director and the person who signs it, I always read the screening always comes to me alongside that. So the screening is always done before we make the decision, unless something is done in extreme urgency. But that's not the case here. We know that this is coming, so the screening will be done. And then, of course, that is published by the department. All the screening documents are published. But we can certainly provide that to the committee as well.
Okay, and is there any risk, I suppose, how will that projected underspend this year on discretionary housing payment, like this is ring fenced at Amy, how will that compare with previous years? Would we be able to see a comparison of that, and could it potentially impact the budget that we receive for discretionary housing payments if we're only spending less than half of it?
So I don't obviously have the figures for previous years, and I'm sure we can get that for the committee from housing executive colleagues. My understanding, I have sort of shared ownership of the DHP policy, so I am aware there has been underspends in previous years, and it hasn't affected the budget that's been allocated. I'm not aware of what the budget allocation will be for 26-27 for DHPs, but certainly in previous years when there has been an underspend, that, to my knowledge, has not adversely affected. The future allocation. I would need to revert to finance colleagues to know if the budget allocation for 26-27 has been confirmed yet.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any other questions, members, for David? Okay, David, thank you for attending and providing that information. So, members, can I ask, do you have any comments, or are you content for the department to proceed to make the rule? Content.
Sadly.
Content.
Yeah. Maybe content isn't the word.
Yeah, they can do
Agreeable.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure that's, but anyway. Okay, thank you, members. Moving on then to agenda item 8, changes to funding for new social homes. We're taking oral evidence today from the Department for Communities. There is no briefing paper, members, for this agenda item. However, other relevant papers can be found at pages 291 to 305 of the meeting pack and pages 79 to 85 of the table papers. No, I'll leave it after. Yeah. I'll take a wee break after this, members, just to flag up. Take a wee short break after this session. So now I'd like to welcome the following officials to the meeting. We're being joined today by Paul Price. Paul is Deputy Secretary of the Housing Sustainability Group in the department. Gerry McAreavey. Gerry is Head of Housing Investment in the Department for Communities. And David Beck, Social Housing Investment Manager, Department for Communities. So, Paul, I think it is yourself that's going to make a brief opening statement, and then we can move to questions from members.
Yes, I've just got a couple of pages here just to sort of set the scene about what the Minister announced in October, etc. That's the briefing you requested, I think. So, look, thanks very much. So, our Minister met with the Federation of Housing Associations and representatives of all developing housing associations in late October to give them advance notice of the changes to grant rates that he announced then a few days later. And he advised them at that meeting that the new rates would be effective from the 1st of December, so they only actually kicked in about a week ago, and they will be effective then till the end of March 27. So I'm just going to give you a summary of what exactly he told them, okay? So a new social home is funded through a combination of grant from the department and then a contribution of borrowing by the developing association, effectively creating a match funding style arrangement which gives value for the public money invested. And the department regularly updates and reviews the assumptions about costs and then the grant rates for its contribution to that match funding arrangement, so as to ensure that the very significant capital investment made by our department, which is typically 80% of its total capital budget in any year, is based on an up-to-date cost assessment of what it costs to develop a new social home and is providing value for money. And what the Minister announced in late October was that he had increased, was two things really. He'd increased the benchmark cost for developing a new social home, and he had increased it by 13.7% from the previous rate, previous benchmark of 181,164 up to an average of 206. Just over 206, 206,100. So that was an acknowledgement that since the last review, which was in 23, costs had gone up. The cost of developing a new social home had gone up by 13.7%. We call that the TCI benchmark, is the practical description of what it does. It uses a range of information such as current land costs provided by Land and Property Services, very importantly construction costs provided by the programme itself, the previous years of building homes by associations in Northern Ireland. It also very importantly factors in what assumptions to make about rental income, all to establish a value for money benchmark for the total average cost for constructing new social homes across the different geographical areas of Northern Ireland. So he announced the TCI increase. He announced then the new grant rate. The grant is, if you like, the support provided via the department's capital allocation. It is effectively funding the shortfall between the overall cost in developing a new social home after you've taken into account what the housing association can borrow, the costs of managing the social home over a long-term cycle, maintenance, major repairs, and also taking into account the income it will get by charging social rent. Rent's really important. So, they are the source of income which enables a housing association to fund its borrowing contribution to the match funding arrangement. They have increased since the last review. And it's as a result of our calculations reflecting those increases that the proportion of grant paid by the department as announced by the Minister will decrease from an average of 54.2% to an average of 46.52%. These are average figures, it's really important to stress. So that's a 7.7% percentage point reduction in the average grant rate since the last review, but in a context where the total cost is going up from 187 to 206k. And what the combined effect of those, right, is that on average, an increased cost to the housing association per unit of less than 3k. And indeed, so that is an average, will vary across council areas, and some council areas will see an increase in the grant rate. One last thing, that date, March 27, i.e. that's unless there is some economic shock to rival the effect of the Ukraine war or COVID, this grant rate is set until March 27. That is really important to give certainty to the sector, which is one thing they were asking for. So those are the two things he announced at the end of October: a new total cost indicator or benchmark and a new grant rate. But he also then announced two other really important things, two reviews. So a review of how we provide the grant, and a review of the design standards according to which social housing is currently developed. So both of these represent an opportunity to look at the programme afresh and identify opportunities to be creative. We do need to do more with less. Working with associations and the Federation to address the barriers to finance and social housing supply. What we're really hoping here is that some of the value increasing measures that these reviews propose may be introduced into the development programme in the next financial year, i.e. they would have the effect in the programme in 26-27 of of realising some savings, reducing the cost of social housing development. But all the reviews should be completed by what we're targeting here, and this is quick, is September 26. So that's my preamble. Very happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. So I suppose, first of all, from myself, you'll be aware that huge concerns have been raised in recent days about the reduction in the level of grant to housing associations. And earlier this week, there's been an independent report commissioned by NIFA which states that roughly only half of the units which are currently planned are now viable under this new funding model. I think there's also huge concern that some of those are in areas of huge need. So I suppose, first of all, were you expecting that level of reduction when you set the grant rate, or do you challenge the conclusions that have been made in that report?
I think I have to. I mean, it isn't yet a report. I mean, it is a set of figures. We have requested further information from the Federation after the press release of those figures was released first thing on Monday. And so far, we have a couple of spreadsheets. So and we only received those on Tuesday and on Wednesday. They do not constitute a report. They do not in particular constitute, I think, it doesn't look like...
Whatever about the title of it, the figures.
But this is really important. We simply do not have an analysis that supports...
Reports here.
Report was given out to all MLAs. It's public knowledge.
It's all of 3 or 4 pages long, and it is really not... It really does not allow us to understand what analysis they have undertaken. So I've asked the Federation for that. I don't want to be dismissive of it, but it is. Those are not at this point substantial figures. What will be really important and really helpful, and I met the Federation yesterday to talk to them about this, is that the programme for 26-27 and the 2 following that will, as is normal, be published in the new year, and it will be shared with the committee. That will reflect the associations, in the meantime, working with the Housing Executive to establish what schemes are viable next year. And I think I'm very happy to come back at that point, but at this point, it is difficult to describe those figures as more than figures. We don't have the analysis. We don't know what constitutes viability in their terms to define, for instance, the rather dramatic reductions those figures describe in Belfast.
I've no doubt we'll be coming back to that.
I am seeking that information from them, and I do not have it yet.
So that then takes me on to my second question, and we will no doubt come back to that, and I think we certainly expect to see a challenge to that presentation of it. However, that remains to be seen. But NIFA themselves have heavily criticised the lack of consultation, and had that consultation taken place, then those figures you're talking about now may have been able to be explored in advance. I'm very conscious this was announced during recess and was coming into place very quickly thereafter, so there was very little chance to scrutinise in that respect. Were you aware of their concerns when you set the rates, and why was a targeted consultation with them not undertaken?
So I think set out the facts of it. So we exchanged with the associations on a range of grant scenarios over a year ago, and the range did include a grant rate proposed very, very similar to the one announced by the Minister at the end of October this year. They were asked to respond to that, and they didn't at that point produce a substantial assessment that it would be not viable. What happened this year was then, in the intervening period, there have been concerted engagements. We had what we called an innovation lab, to which the sector was invited, which were looking at ways, in the summer of this year, which were looking at ways of driving out better value from the programme. So there has been concerted engagement, and of course when we get to the point in late October, they are given advance notice, which is at that point of a decision the Minister has made, but he is of course signalling that it takes effect in 6 weeks' time at that point, and what that does of course is primarily enable the effect of it to be worked out with some time ahead, because the effect will be in terms of from next year's programme onward, not this year's. This is not affecting any units on site, and it's primarily not affecting the SHDP this year, which, as we have just seen, as of the December monitoring round, is absorbing 29.8 million extra capital and increasing its units target for this year from 1150 to 1750. So it's demonstrably not affecting that. So there was engagement, and there is, and this is a really important point, considerable scope for engagement from this point on the terms that the Minister has announced. And this is a point I've made to the associations directly. We need to work with them on those terms and their application to the new build programme next year.
Well, given that concern, and given there is ongoing consultation or discussion with them, as you say, how will you ensure that in areas of highest need, where the housing is badly needed, that this decision will not negatively impact the new starts?
We'll need to do it with them, but it is being done now. It will be done according to the proper timescale it produces, in the same way it's done every year, towards production and publication of a programme for the next 3 years, which will be this year done in January as it's done, next year will be done in January, covering the 3 years subsequent to that, including 26-27. You'll see the fruit of it then.
If an area of highest need was being impacted, there was a threat to a start, would you be prepared to vary the grant in those areas of highest need to ensure those developments go ahead?
I don't think so. The Minister's decision is taken. The point is to challenge them to find ways of making those schemes viable on the grant rate. I mean, the point is to is where can we reduce the costs of social housing so that those schemes are viable. It is important to note that...
Are you saying that what you're going to do, and that brings me on to my third question, is actually reduce the design standards in terms of future-proofing for disability? Because I think that's a really problematic direction of travel. So are you saying you're going to offer them, instead of the grant, you're going to say to them, we'll allow you to build to a lower standard?
I think we should, we're working on the terms of reference for both of those reviews right now, amongst others, with the housing associations. I can't go into them in detail, but I can say they are seeking to be rounded, comprehensive. They do seek value for money, but they do not. They try. The whole point is to find ways that safeguard essential quality whilst achieving value for money. I think what we need to do is share you those terms of reference once the Minister has approved them, and then we can talk about those in detail. But those terms of reference are not a dash for cheapest chips. They are holistic, comprehensive reviews, both of the standards and of the grant rate.
Okay, I want to get to members, but I just wanted to make the comment that as a social worker, the amount of times that we have been frustrated with saying a very, very small design in this building would have allowed so much more, and I do not want to see that put at risk. We're also very conscious here as a committee in terms of the scale and the amount and the cost of retrofitting, and we could be building in future cost in that sense, which is penny wise, pound foolish potentially.
I'm not giving away too much, but those things are in the draft terms of reference as we are discussing them with stakeholders. It's all subject to Minister, but it is that kind of holistic review we are conceiving of.
The design element will also include representation on the stakeholders from the Department of Health, so that should help alleviate some of that.
Okay, I'm going to come to Kelly there at that point.
Guys, I'm a housing spokesperson. I have to say, when I heard this coming through, I was like, this is a knee-jerk reaction to a budget problem as opposed to thinking strategically about Northern Ireland's housing problem. We have far too many people who don't have a permanent home in Northern Ireland, and we're asking housing associations, the majority of whom are charities, to pay more for what government should be paying for. And I am very disappointed in that. I know that you've said that you've increased the house build to 206,100. It needed to happen anyway because the amount that you were given in the Housing Association grant wasn't enough. To be honest, the amount of housing associations that are having to put in pumping stations because of Northern Ireland Water has increased their costs, and you weren't considering that before. The housing associations report, and I know you have issues with their figures. I have issues with your figures because I'm not seeing details on them. It's all big figures. It's not giving me the breakdown. You've said that it will cost those housing associations on average about $3,000 per house. Give us the calculations on that, please. The housing associations have told us that it'll cost them additional 23 million. So there's a disjoint there somewhere. So if we could see the breakdown of how the calculations have been come to by yourselves, that would be very helpful. With regards to the consultation on the design standards, if you go anywhere near disability facilities, I honestly believe that it will go nowhere. And I'm saying that because I don't believe that you have taken the demographics of Northern Ireland into consideration when we have an ageing population. It's not just people who are born with disabilities, it's people who become disabled through injury, illness and age. And I have the highest number of people who are older who need disability or disabled facilities adaptations done to their housing executive social homes and private properties that would scare the life out of you, and we are not able to meet those needs. But I just wanted to go back to you on this. The report that we have received from NIFA has said that the number of houses that they will be able to take forward, I have an issue. I worked in a social enterprise, a community and voluntary sector organisation before I came to this place, and my reaction back to you would be, if you're not funding it, we can't do it, because they are being asked to take on a fundamental governance risk that I don't think that you have any idea of the difficulty that that causes. Lose their charitable status under the Charity Commission if they are taking on so much debt to cover what government should be paying for, that they're no longer viable as companies. And I think that's what the housing associations have been saying to us. So in calculating this 54.2 down to 46%, can we have a breakdown of the calculation on that, where you think those savings are coming from? And if it is purely to get them to borrow more, why are you not taking the risk? Why are you making them take the risk with banks?
Can I maybe just touch on the methodology that exists at the minute hasn't changed. So the methodology is a sort of seesaw between rent and income generation against grant. So
we get a breakdown of
certainly,
that, please. That would be very helpful.
That 3,000 per unit is an average cost spread out across the entire programme. Each individual housing scheme will be funded differently based on its location and based on the number of units and the type of units that are being built. So the 3,000 is just an illustrative issue. As Paul said earlier, there will be some areas where the new grant rate will be beneficial to the housing associations.
Yeah, we've got the report on that.
But
yeah,
certainly we can certainly provide the figures that were behind those figures. But it's an illustrative example. It's not meant to be a 3,000 per unit across the piece.
Because in Belfast, as we know, land is a commodity that's in short supply. Same with Lisburn, and they're the two areas that are going to be hit the worst.
So yeah, we'll provide the information to you, and that's not a problem. You will get lots of information from us. I mean, the decision really rested on two things, right? The decision not to change the assumption made in calculating grant about the costs of borrowing, an assumption that has been the same since 21, I think, and has, if you like, remained constant when borrowing was considerably cheaper than the assumption. And the value for money of that decision is only maintained if we now maintain it now when borrowing is slightly more expensive, albeit predicted to fall. Bank of England will later next week. So, and it's importantly, it's an assumption about the cost of their borrowing over a 35-year period, and the decision taken was not to change it. The other decision was to reflect in the grant calculation that rent increases.
Can I just ask you, when you've said it was the decision not to change their borrowing, the borrowing comes from banks.
Yes.
So it's their decision what they are allowing, and
we have to make a calculation that has value for money as it's concerned about what will be the level of our funding contribution on the assumption of how much borrowing their contribution will cost them in borrowing costs. And we decided not to keep that at the same level we'd had it at for 4 to 5 years, including a period when it was providing them a much more favourable level of grant support than it does now. So we have to take a long view of that. I defend both decisions there, right? And then the only changed thing was to make a decision about what assumption we make about rental income in calculating the grant rate. And if we had not reflected the fact that rents have gone up in our rental assumption, then the benefit of that, of in inverted commas, the benefit of those rent increases would not have been felt at all in any increased units. All of that money is going into social housing, and it would not have been felt in increased units.
So can I take you back a bit? Social housing is about people. The increased rents that are going to have to be charged because the grant levels have come down, what impact is that going to have on people being able to afford? Because we already hear that people think that social housing is too expensive.
It's because, I take your point, but it's because rental income is fundamentally about services, which are fundamentally for people. There is no sustainable home unless there is a viable rental income charged. Okay. What we're saying here is that since the last review, that rental income, there had been changes to it. If we did not reflect those changes in the grant rate calculation, then the benefit that would have been to the landlord and not felt in any increase in units.
Okay, but it's still people will be paying more rent
Yes, indeed.
to pay a bank for the additional costs. So while we seem to be looking at a bang for the better bang for the buck for yourselves, it's actually people on the ground that are going to be paying for this.
It's probably worth saying that the rental figures that we use in the calculation to calculate the HAG rate, those are provided to us by the housing executive, and those are the lowest, the 30th percentile figures, effectively the LHA rate. Those are previous figures, so those are based on rents that are already being charged, not increased, not looking to, and there's nothing built into anything that we've done to suggest that there should be a further increase to that. Those were based on figures from effectively last year, I suppose.
How many of those people who are paying the rent are having to go to a discretionary housing payment to make up the difference?
I wouldn't have that information.
That's the sort of stuff, to be honest, I would have thought would have been known. Look, guys, I'm not happy with the cut that has happened. I can't hide that. I believe at a time that we have the most disgusting level of homelessness in Northern Ireland, that the last thing we should have been doing was cutting back on providing money to the people who are actually building houses. My concern also is that the housing executive are sitting on the side here, and if the go-ahead comes from Treasury that they can borrow, are they going to be 100% funded, or are they going to follow this same route?
I think the initial focus of a green light from Treasury on housing executive borrowing will be about maintenance of the existing homes they have, right? I mean, in some ways, if the situation gets to the point where they have the capacity to look at new social build, we will have progressed significantly from where we are now. We don't have the green light at this point. I mean, it's not a cut. In fact, with the 29.8 million going in, we will spend 207 million on social housing development this year.
No,
that is the highest, and because a substantial amount of that is going between on 5,000 to 6,000 units already on site. I'm
sorry, but we've 60,000 people in homeless waiting. It's not even touching the sides. We can't congratulate ourselves on building more homes when it's not getting where we need to go.
I'm not congratulating ourselves, but the language is really important. It is not a cut. This is a record level investment in SHDP this year. What the Minister has done is try and make changes that will drive as many units as possible from that budget.
You've already said that it's an average of 3,000 per house. The Housing Federations have said 23 million. That means it's not a cut for you, but for them it means increased borrowing. And that effectively targets their budget. So I know you're saying that's not a cut, but in the real world, when you have to manage an organisation like this, you have to consider the risk. And the risk might be, it's time to stop this game. We can't afford to take on more debt just to satisfy a government's problem.
I don't think the press release produced on Monday reflects that particularly substantially. What we need to do, we are challenging them to bear down on costs and drive better value from their borrowing. We are, absolutely.
What cuts
but I mean, if the outcome is more social units, and we spend our budget on those terms, that will have been achieved, and we will have driven better value for money and more social units from the SHDP budget. That is the point.
Based on building regulations.
And there will still be, it'll make whatever, we can talk about the proportion of the impact relative to the waiting list, but the effect of the programme on the waiting list will have been greater because of this decision.
But if we're building rubbish, I know that housing associations are going above and beyond what the building regulations require. Building regulations are 15 years out of date. Absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace. Not your fault. Absolute disgust. And we should be going for EPC A rated housing so that we can generate some energy and reduce fuel poverty. But we've got a state at the moment where we have houses, if we stuck to the building regulations, if we went cheap and built to the basic standard, those homes will need to be retrofitted in less than 10 years. We'll be throwing good money after bad.
We're not going cheap. And I meant to come back here on we're responding to the sector in these reviews in part. They themselves have been, and we need to listen to them on this. They have been saying there are ways of reducing the cost of social housing without fundamentally challenging the quality of what we provide, which is very good and which we want to keep. So the review is to take their view on that.
Okay, Mark, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Many of my points have been made and made very well by yourself and Kelly. It all seems a bit of a gamble. I fear this, and obviously the Housing Association in their independent review that was published on Monday. I know you're not dismissing that, but you're not concurring with it entirely or at all. It would seem either. So, like, I mean, it's that risk that's involved, and how the success or otherwise of this move is measured. The minister, when he brought the statement to the Assembly, he was very much, if more homes will be delivered, and that's how the success will be measured. But there are multiple factors as to how or why more homes will be delivered, and hope that more homes need to be delivered next year than they have this year, given that it's been a record low. Although I know there's the monitoring round money that has come that will enable around 600 new starts, and they are just starts, because you won't get much done between now and the end of March on them, and the money to do the completions will have to come out of next year's. But in terms of this gamble, how have other jurisdictions been looked at? I remember answering someone else's question. The minister said other areas have cut the rate. But from my readings or knowledge, there's also been a reduction in the number of homes delivered. So could you give us a sort of flavour of what's happened elsewhere and what impact that's had?
Gerry,
I can't necessarily comment on what's happened in other jurisdictions. What happens whenever we have our total cost indicator and Housing Association grant review carried out, that there is a sense check against what happens in Scotland and Wales, which are comparable to here. But we don't have any of the figures on England or the Republic of Ireland. What I would say, though, is that that's been reflected in the terms of reference for the review of subsidy, that comparisons are to be drawn in some of the other jurisdictions in terms of what might be best practice. So we could maybe build on those through the review.
Yes, but where there have been reductions elsewhere, do we know even the I suppose relationship between what's been put in, or the rate that's been put in at, and what's come out the other end in terms of numbers?
I don't have those figures now. I can certainly follow up if that's okay.
No, that would definitely be useful. It's the sort of thing you'd think would help or would have informed this decision of this potential magnitude. And if, say, for whatever reason, we come to this time next year or post-review period and fewer homes have been delivered, will this be one of the factors that lack of delivery will be attributed to? And will it be potentially revised upwards again? Because often it's like gravity in reverse. What comes down doesn't tend to go back up.
I think the grant funding models in the other jurisdictions, particularly the comparable ones, they don't afford that kind of straight line comparison. I mean, we have very specific ways of funding social housing. And they are very different in some of those jurisdictions. So you couldn't always draw that comparison, but we'll send you the information, okay? I suppose
the minister was the first person to make it. He says, it's been reduced in Scotland or reduced elsewhere.
And he reflected the general point that public authorities are in search of value in order to try and meet housing need, as are we. But the important thing will be between now and some point in the next calendar year, there will be a budget allocated to the SHDP. If it is expended in full on these terms, it will have achieved more units than it otherwise would have done. It will be important what kind of geographical distribution of units is achieved as we do that. So we will know in time, right? The point is that simply keeping things as they were particularly given the budgetary challenges to the SHDP, was not really an option. I mean, on the face of it, the analysis the housing associations have provided is what will happen if the unchanged financials of each of their schemes are plugged into the new terms of grant. And the point is to challenge those financials to change, to bear down on costs.
No, and I fully get
Mark.
the need to get as big a bang for our buck as possible, and I think that's something all of us want to see. It is, I suppose, just the risk associated with that, be it in terms of reduction of standards, although I'm sure we're not going to be talking about building shanty towns or anything like that, and that the associations will still deliver housing of a very good standard, albeit a lesser standard than that is currently being delivered by them and demanded of them. But it's just, you made the point earlier about the benefit of rent increases having been felt by the landlord. I think I'm not sure around the accuracy of that statement, and it's fair to say that they've been felt by tenants as well, because that money's come back in the maintenance, etc., of existing schemes. And if more money has to go from the landlord and the build, there'll be less to go into that sort of maintenance, and that's going to have to come from somewhere, and we're going to see rates or rents go up again. And we just, prior to use coming in, we were talking about the freezing of the LHA, so that's going to inevitably have a negative impact on tenants.
I didn't mean, I can imagine and I do regard them as colleagues in the HA sector, not appreciating me talking about the benefits going to the landlord. I did mean what you talked about, but I suppose the really important point is there are competing, there are things that compete for that rental income, and we have to make sure that there is a fair contribution of it reflected in future supply, as well as in the maintenance of the home. We have to make sure of that because of the waiting list.
Okay, we're going to have to keep moving on. Andy, go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Just to pick up on the point, Paul, that other members have raised about, and you'd highlighted robustly, that this is not a cut, but would you accept it is a cut to the grant?
It's a reduction in the grant rate, 7.7%.
Cut to the grant. So coming back to that point, and you'd mentioned that throughout the year in engaging with housing associations, you'd looked at various different scenarios, and the one in which the Minister opted for is not too dissimilar to what was being discussed. Can you give us more insight into that? What was being discussed, the various different options, and how similar to what was being discussed is that which was announced?
Not much more than I think there were 2 or 3 scenarios, one of which bore very close resemblance to the outcome on grant rate that we've.
But can you give us figures?
I can. I mean, really close, right? Within less than a percentage point, decimal points. You know.
Okay.
But I'm happy to get you the exact details on that.
And can you give us some insight into the communication from housing associations, whether through the Federation or individually, as to their analysis of?
Yeah, so, I mean, it bears some comparison with what's happened now. We did get a sort of a set of numbers, but there was it was a real difficulty for us in understanding what kind of analysis supported those numbers.
Okay, so it'd be fair to say housing associations raised significant concerns. The department didn't accept those and pressed ahead.
Well, no, because I mean we're talking about at that point. This was towards a decision on grant rates that the Minister then deferred and maintained the 20 outcome of the 23 review until this point. Since then, we've had an innovation lab with the housing associations, and then we've had the process I described in October.
No, and it's good that you're having on engagement with housing associations, but you're said to us here that the figures housing association presented aren't dissimilar to what they presented now. So clearly what that's saying to me is they highlighted their concerns at the time, the department didn't accept those and pressed ahead.
Yeah, but we've had the analysis conducted by this year's review since that point. You know, we've had, for instance, as David is saying, we've had the decision to make about whether rent increases that have taken place since 2023 should be reflected in the grant rate.
Yeah, but equally, if we pivot across in the grant rate and the benchmarking you highlighted, and I'm not a subject matter expert here, you are, so I'm deferring to your knowledge here, but the department seemed to have accepted cost having going up in relation to the benchmarking, but then seems to be placing a significant amount of weight on rent increases. Would you not accept it's fair that housing associations are experiencing increased costs, and a lot of that has been absorbed by their increased costs, and it shouldn't stand to reason that, oh, actually you're bringing in more receipts, so we're going to cut your grant?
But we're reflecting both. So we're reflecting their increased costs in our overall benchmark figure, but we're reflecting the increased rental income in the grant rate.
But clearly housing associations are saying you're not. Because they're saying this is going to result in a reduction. They're saying we dispute your analysis, we dispute your calculation. Here is our analysis and calculation. I appreciate that housing associations need to cut their mustard in that regard, but they're the only show in town. And is this really the way we want to be treating the housing associations and having this, what seems to me, and you may not accept this categorisation, public debate, public spat in relation to the amount of grant? Housing associations are clearly saying, and I and colleagues have articulated their own views, are deeply concerned by that in relation to where we presently are. And what I've heard from you, Paul, is housing associations presented very similar figures to what they've presented now, which is saying they highlighted to the department the concerns at which the grant, if was implemented, which the department has implemented, would cause.
So, look, I agree with you, right? It's really important we have a really good relationship with our housing associations. And I have had a lot of engagement with them this week to make that point. The important thing is that we work with them between now and the beginning of the programme next year to see what can be done on the terms the Minister has announced.
That really concerns me, though.
I don't think... No, in many ways that's entirely normal. That's exactly what happens after every TCI review. I don't want to be dismissive of those figures, because I work with these people, and I do respect their analysis, but I want to see it, and I don't think we've yet seen it. I want to see it in the context, and we will see it though as we go through the normal process to produce the programme for 26-27. I think it's probably a good idea that we come back to you then.
Just to interrupt, can I point out we still haven't seen the details of your figures. We've requested that detail. We haven't had it in advance of today's meeting. So while those figures may be disputed by you, at least those are figures. The department has given us no figures.
And equally, Chair, from my perspective, if I was having engagement with housing associations, again, this is hypothetical, but it's just how I would go through the process. We had a conversation around different scenarios. The scenario that you're going to opt for, housing associations clearly, and you've said this to us, Paul, had provided feedback which you may not have felt has been fully drilled down upon, but that feedback they were providing was saying, look, caution, if you deliver on this grant rate, decimal point of a difference, it's going to have a devastating impact. Would that not have been the time for the department to actually say, right, we have concerns with your figures back then, rather than now having this debate and saying, oh, but it's going to be April and we can have dialogue and conversation? There seems to me that there was a lot of time in the intervening period in which the department could have been having that dialogue, or was that dialogue happening and you don't feel...
Yeah, of course it was. And there was a 2-day innovation lab to which they were invited in that period. And the dialogue is important between now and the publication of the programme next year.
You can provide us with all of the correspondence communication between the department and the housing associations where you're drilling down on the figures that they provided at that time when you were discussing the very similar rate?
It would have all been future focused from the point when a decision was taken not to introduce a new grant rate last year. So you're not going to have a blow-by-blow account, okay? But there was an innovation lab in the summer of this year, which amongst other things was looking at how to drive better value from the programme.
If we pivot over to what the Minister ultimately said and what this is about, it's about doing more with less. From the department's fundamental analysis, how much more is housing association going to deliver?
Well, the best indication at this point is that average increase in their cost, decrease in hours per unit.
How many units? How many units more?
It's really difficult. It's very hard to go beyond that.
This is the fundamental premise on which this change is being pushed through. Housing associations are saying, no, we dispute your analysis. It's going to be less. I want to know quite clearly, because quite clearly who have elected me and other colleagues want to know how many more homes are going to be delivered to lift them out of housing stress and homelessness. So how many more units are we going to be getting with doing more with less?
I'm not going to be able to tell you that right now. We'll be able to tell you that next year. But you've got an indication of it in that calculation. So essentially what we're pitching at is an increase in value for money in the grant rate of between 2 and 3%. So, you know, if you imagine that applied to any of the outputs of the years of the SHDP, I can't give you that figure at the moment. Okay. It really does, you know, Gerry made the point. Actual grant is calculated on a scheme-per-scheme basis. You're being given indicative average figures here.
Okay, I think we could go on in relation to that. If we can pivot over to design standards, and I would obviously echo the concerns that colleagues have raised, and accept your reassurance that we're not going to see lower standards being delivered. But many of the housing associations that have been in many of the homes that have been built to lifetime specification, and I think it's important we're doing that, because down the line then we encounter all sorts of problems where homes haven't been delivered to that lifetime specification. So you're saying about obviously there's going to be a consultation process, engagement, review. When is that expected, and would it not have been more pragmatic to have done this in sync with the setting of a new grant rate?
We have done it in sync. So I mean, the review is one of the points of the review is to help associations with the new grant rate, with effect from 26-27. We can share terms of reference with you probably in the new year. At that point, they'll be approved by the Minister. We've worked on them with the sector. There'll be a sense of timescale with those. There's already a sense of timescale. We aim to finish by September next year.
So in terms of having done that in sync with the process, have you communicated the associations then, for example, and I think it was to Kelly or Mark, housing associations communicated to the department there are areas where they feel as subject matter experts that they can make savings without impacting on the wider design. So you've communicated to them, here are areas that you will be given scope to make savings?
Well, we haven't got to that point yet. What we've done,
so it hasn't been done in sync then? Well, so if you haven't said to them fundamentally, right, here are areas where you can make savings, thus for make the grant go further, it's not being done in sync as far as I would see that.
The associations over the last number of years have probably raised issues around design standards and some of the things that they feel are over and above what they would need to deliver.
What are those?
Well, I can't go into the detail. I mean, secure by design is one example that they've said that there is a requirement within the development guide currently that all homes have to be a certain standard of secure by design, and they're saying that as a platinum standard is high for the majority of their houses. They're not saying that the majority of homes wouldn't fail of those, but they're saying there's a lot of developments that don't need that platinum standard of secure by design. So that's one of the areas that they've raised with the department. They've also raised the issue around lifetime homes as to whether they need to put that into all of their properties or whether they should be putting it into a proportion of their properties. That will all be captured in the review. The terms of reference, the draft terms of reference for the design review were shared with NIFA recently, and we have their feedback just received this week. Okay. And they will be part and parcel of the stakeholder group that goes forward on that.
And is this going out to public consultation?
The terms of reference?
The consultation on the design?
No.
Why not?
Well, it simply wouldn't be essential at this point. What will be subject to public consultation is anything like, you know, a fundamental change to the design standard that requires an EQIA or some such.
Well, it does, because you're saying that you're taking away that all life, and we have a growing ageing population that have limited mobility.
We're not saying we're including issues like secured by design and others in terms of reference for consideration by the review. If that review then says things that require public consultation, then there will be public consultation. But we're sort of we're embarking on a policy development process that has at this point no proposals for public consultation, but has a scope.
Back to Andy here.
Just one more question, Chair, if I may. So, just so I'm clear, so the department's viewpoint position at this present time is housing associations can deliver more with less grant as we currently stand, and that will bear out in time. So you expect to see more social homes be built next year. So
there's a really important point here, right? So the TCI went up from 187 to 206. Right? It's a 13.7% increase. So that is the construction inflation of our programme in the intervening period. That is higher than construction inflation. So there is an issue about the cost increase of the programme.
Yeah.
We need a grant rate that motivates the housing associations to get at that. So you know that it is of escalating costs to develop new social homes in Northern Ireland. It is in everyone's interest that an effort is made to bear down on that, because otherwise that will just continue to erode the number of units that our budget secures.
Don't dispute any of that, Paul, and I really appreciate you'll always want to put context to any scenario, but what I'm looking for here is a simple yes or no. In terms of what the department has done, it is the department's view that we will see more social homes delivered next year.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can obviously analyse that against what is actually delivered. Two, when we obviously go through the review process, which hasn't been delivered, there are areas where housing associations have clearly articulated that they can make savings and deliver more value for money. So that when that's delivered through, we're likely to see if those changes which housing associations are highlighting to the department, they can deliver more value for money. So if they're taken forward, that is another area where you're likely then to see more with less.
So that's one of the objectives of the review. And to a time scale that will help deliver more with less in next year's programme.
Okay, appreciate that, and I look forward to getting all that information so we can analyse it in more detail.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So just going back, and before we come to members then for follow-up, I'll let you go. The housing associations have said that the new grant levels would reduce the overall number of social homes from 2,092 to 1,100. They've stated that in Belfast the number of new homes falls from 1026 to just 337. You have told us that you're exploring those figures and seeking more information on those figures. If those figures turn out to be right or partially right, what will you do about it to protect the number of homes being built?
What we will do is produce a programme for next year that will reflect a proper process of interrogation analysis between Development Programming Group and the Housing Executive and housing associations. At that point, you will have an authoritative projected sort of forward look for 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29. It really, I mean, I just cannot at this point speculate beyond that, and it would be pointless when so soon we will have that authoritative forward look.
And when can this committee expect to have your figures so we can apply some analysis and scrutiny to your figures?
You know, as soon as we can. As soon as we have them now, so we'll get them to you quickly.
So we should have them for next week if you have them now.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can share with you the pack we gave the housing associations, and we can show you why, you know, pretty much why and how we calculated the grant rate as we did.
Okay, Pam, very quickly, please. There's a late indication there, so go ahead, Pam.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I'm still very new to this committee, and it's a fascinating topic, and I've enjoyed listening to the debate back and forward, and I think we'll all be looking forward to that, seeing the proof of the pudding next year. Be interesting to see. I'm just wondering, Chair, what we will do if these guys are right and you're all wrong. I look forward to seeing.
I'm happy to commend them if they're right.
Yes.
Yeah, but we need to see the figures first.
Look, I'm not claiming to be an expert on the subject. You guys clearly are invested in the subject, so look forward to it. I would praise you for not doing things how they've always been done and expecting the same result. We've talked so much around this place about doing things differently and getting more. So I sincerely wish you well in the work that you're doing, and we absolutely need to see more value for money, and we need to see better provision for our constituents. The most important thing is that we do deliver as far as we physically can on those targets that we need. We need more social homes. People need good quality housing to live in, and that's what we all want as MLAs to deliver for people on the ground. So I wish you well in what's going forward. Just a quick question on the reviews. So you said you could possibly be able to share terms of reference with us maybe in the new year around the reviews, but when would you expect those reviews to be complete?
We're aiming for September.
September.
So I think we'll complete our process of revising them after having shared them with lots and lots of stakeholders. And they'll then go, I'm not really in charge of this part of the timescale, but they'll go to the Minister for his approval I imagine, typically, so that will enable us to share them with you in the new year, and we'll complete it by September. But I think by the time we share them with you in the new year, there might be more information about the intervening period, you know, the milestones towards completion by September.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that one? If you're sharing it with lots of stakeholders, why not include the people who will be living in those homes, the public?
They will be included in the review, and they will have membership on the two groups for the attendance policy is really important.
But not a public consultation?
It'd be quite a difficult question to put to the public. What should be the scope of our review of the methodology for grant rate and the design specifications for social housing? It surely be much more important to engage with the public as necessary on what your review says you will do about those things when you can describe the effects. So it's just a timing issue. We're not. I don't think we're doing anything particularly guarded or secretive here. But we want to get the expertise of everyone involved in social housing production to consider the scope, and then we'll go wider when we have something to say.
It's a guarantee then that the public will have their say on the way this is going forward.
I don't know what proposals these reviews are going to produce. But if public consultation is important and necessary for any of those, yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Paul, Gerry and David, for attending today. We'll touch base with members in terms of any follow-up action, and this is one I think that we will be keeping a very close eye on over the very short next period of time, given the importance of this issue and given the extent that's been mentioned by members here, homelessness, the need for housing. We are very conscious that the Minister's bid has been met in full for this year, and we're keen to see greater numbers of starts.
Not quite in full. I mean, he's got closer to it with the monitoring round, but no, it was.
Well, the bid in the monitoring round in full. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so we will be keeping a very keen eye and interest in that. But thank you for and we look forward to receiving that more detailed information back from you. Thank you.
Thank
okay.
you.
Thanks. Good luck.
Christmas.
Okay, members, anything members want to flag in terms of follow-up? So we've had a commitment there to get those figures sent through.
So I have a list. Do you want me to run through them?
Yes,
here?
please do, Clerk.
Request the detailed figures, assumptions and worked examples which were used in the decision-making process to change the funding model. Comparative figures of the impact of similar change from other jurisdictions. Report or detailed information from the Innovation Lab, which took place in the summer. Is there anything else?
Chair, the only thing I would ask is, in order to put important context to this, with one side of the conversation and debate, obviously NIFA have put their own analysis out. I think it would be really important in the new year. I appreciate how busy the calendar is, but they ask NIFA to come in and we can obviously hear their perspective as well and obviously ask them questions.
Yeah, and there were several mentions made to NIFA Housing Association were invited to the Innovation Lab. I wonder if they took up that invitation. I think it would, and if not, why not? Or what that process was, or how that fed into the overall consideration. It's not very clear as to whether they did engage.
To add that to the report, the request for the information, and which housing associations were in attendance.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I ask, just additionally to this, there's a discrepancy going on here, because the Minister made clear in the statement that the savings to be made was on the all life housing standard. They seem to be saying here that they haven't told housing associations what standard to go for. That's still to go through review. I think this is something that we need to tease out with NIFA. What have they been told so far are the savings that they appear to have agreed to, the way that the department's talking to, because that's not what they're telling me.
Yeah, I think it's key. I think we do need to speak to
What's that question? Sorry,
so
what saving?
It's the NIFA, when they're coming to see us, we need to work out what design standards have they agreed to that will achieve this savings. Honestly, God. To be honest, do you know what? This really, I'm flabbergasted that the banks aren't talking to us about this, because their mortgages are dependent on sustainable homes. There's a whole missing key here. We're assuming that there's going to be banks fronting up to us.
3 million of additional funding available. Yeah, so I think we'll take it in stages. We'll talk to NIFA and then we can decide if there's further direction we need to travel on that. Are members content with those actions? Okay, members, going to, with your consent, maybe suggest a quick comfort break before we go into our final briefing today. So we'll take a 5-minute break there, members. Thank you.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29. Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room,
which is agenda item 10, Sign Language Bill, Departmental Oral Evidence. The papers for the agenda items start at page 307 of the meeting pack. Draft amendments for consideration can be found at 341, and a copy of the committee requests for clarification and amendments along with the deliberations can also be found in the meeting pack. Also contained within the table paper starting on page 86 are responses from the department relating to the requested amendments, together with the draft guidance and draft list of prescribed organisations. And I welcome that information, I have to say. So I'd now like to welcome the following officials to the meeting. We're joined by Iain Greenway, who is a Sign Language Policy and Legislation branch in the Department for Communities. Tommy McAuley. Tommy is also within the Sign Language Policy and Legislation branch, and Gerard Flynn from the Sign Language Policy and Legislation branch in the Department for Communities. So Iain, thank you for expediting the response to committee's specific requests. We acknowledge these were sent just last week and responses have been received and for discussion at today's meeting. That's useful. Do you and your colleagues wish to brief the committee any further in relation to ongoing work and our queries in relation to the bill clauses before we move to questions from members?
Yes, if I may, I'll make a few opening remarks, if I may, Chair, and thank you very much. Just a few updates I want to provide, really. The committee wrote to the Department on the 24th of November requesting confirmation about a range of documents you had asked for and whether they'd be received, and we indicated they'd be received by the 4th of December. My apologies, they have only arrived this week, and due to a range of things within the department. And as you would expect, they are all work in progress because they will emanate from as well as work on from the bill. I also wanted to pick up that last time I was here, I commented that any amendments to the bill would require executive approval, and that created some debate and use of different words. And I should have made the distinction between amendments that are technical and or presentation in nature, which do not in fact require executive approval, and those that seek a change in policy content for which the department must seek executive approval. I therefore wish to clarify this point, which is also covered in one of our recent letters, which refers to the guidance on legislation. So I wish to set the record straight on that matter, Chair. I also want to rehearse that this is a sign language bill whose scope is for the recognition and promotion of BSL and ISL as languages of Northern Ireland with equal status, the further development of deaf culture and accessibility of public information services to the deaf community as defined for the purposes of the bill. It is not the intent of the bill to improve or replace existing disability legislation. The committee wrote to the department on 2nd of December to set out its request for amendments and further explanation following your deliberations on that date. You requested the department's response should indicate if the department would accept, not accept or partially accept the amendments sought by the committee. The department has responded to the letter. I trust you've had an opportunity to consider it. Subject to the committee's confirmation it is content for the department to take forward agreed amendments, the department will instruct OLC accordingly, and Minister will notify other executive ministers in line with the procedures in the legislative guide. On the 3rd of December, you wrote to us to advise that in addition to your deliberations on particular clauses in the bill, you had considered other issues received in evidence whilst not fitting within particular clauses are relevant to your consideration of the bill and requested an update on these. I would advise the committee the department has prioritised responding to the committee's request for amendments and further information on the bill's clauses given the staff resources available in the bill team. The department will collate information on these other issues and get back to the committee with a formal response, aiming to do that before the end of the Christmas recess. We are therefore very happy to work through the amendment list, which is the next stage in the legislative process and would then enable us to update Minister and to instruct OLC to begin the drafting process to bring things back before your report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Iain. So, first of all then, in terms of the committee's potential amendment to clause 7, which sought to change the word may to must, can you expand on the reason as to why you didn't feel this was an amendment that you were prepared to look at?
Yes, Gerard will speak. Sorry.
Gerard
will speak to
yes,
that. The switched on you, and the switched on you.
Yeah, it's the wrong.
It was outside last time.
May gives you options. Must means we must make regulations in respect to these. And 7 is more there to future-proof the bill more than anything else. So we have our 2 provisions where we say we must make regulations around interpretation and training, and we must make regulations around prescribed organisations. This is a normal concept within legislation that you give the option of making a number of other regulations, but you're not statutorily obliged to make those. A must means that you're statutorily obliged to make some regulations around those, where a may gives you the choice.
Okay, and I do get that up to that point, but could you give us some examples of regulations that may be required, that you feel may be required under clause 7 in the future?
We haven't not definitive at the moment, but we're looking at things like instances in legislation where you have to make a written application. So you may in future make regulations in some instances where you can make a sign language application. We've also got the advent of AI and avatars, and we may more than likely will have to make regulations about the introduction of AI, because there will be positives in relation to that, but there will also be negatives. And that is something that the department will look at, and the deaf community, because although AI can be positive, also it's not impersonal. and the deaf community have some concerns around that. So there's that in particular. If movement was to come in technology or stuff like that, then we would make regulations so the positive elements of that technology was put through, and the negative elements weren't placed throughout the department. Okay.
The other one that I wanted to ask about before I come to members then is that you have also rejected the committee's amendment around commencing the 5-year period after royal assent instead of commencement after a. So you've said basically that you believe it's better to take place instead of commencement. So why, if you've said, the key part of it is you've said you believe that will be very shortly after anyway. So if it's going to be very shortly after anyway, why not just make that amendment? And is that an indication that you would have a concern that the commencement, there could be a long delay in the commencement period? Is that?
No, but the intention, and it will be commenced, all sections of this bill will be commenced except section will be clause 3, because it places the duties on. That can't be commenced until we've got the guidance out and published. So every section will be commenced. So in effect, what you're talking about is a day or two, because we'll have that commencement order straight in after royal assent. So to change the bill for the space of a couple of days, it's not really reasonable. In effect, you're talking about a 5-year report being made. Whether that's made 5 years and 3 days or 5 years and a week won't make any substantive difference.
Well, you could argue that the other way. If it's not making a big difference, what's the harm? But anyway, I'll take that as you say for now. I'll go to Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming back to us quite quickly. I know we were frustrated with you before, but you have actually returned these quite quickly, so the apology earlier, Iain, wasn't needed.
I'll take it. Shall I?
I'll take that as a win.
And sad.
I just wanted to check with you. I know that you've said that promotion, clause 2, you're talking about the department, and we had suggested to such extent and such manner the department considers appropriate. My concern on that was that the department, while certainly holding the lead, isn't the deaf community itself. So the promotion of interests, I think it needs to be a bit clearer there. Would there be a consideration? I know that you've come back to us on what we have suggested, that removing that in collaboration with the deaf community. Promotion.
Okay, I'm going to let Tommy speak to that, but I'm just going to say, as intro to that, absolutely the department recognise it isn't the deaf community. There are many stakeholders in this, which include public sector, deaf community, other people, etc., etc. Neither must the lead department be a cipher that it simply is an inbox and sends something automatically to an outbox. There is a set of duties and responsibilities there, but in that context, I'll let Tommy pick the points up.
And I have referred previously to the body of work the department has progressed in the absence of, I suppose, a lead deaf organisation or body, because each of the deaf organisations have their own constitutions, mission statements and functions. So we've stepped into that, and through our chair and secretariat of the Sign Language Partnership Group, which encompasses deaf organisations and is the usual vehicle that the department goes through to consult in everything it does. We do believe that there's no negative impact for the wording at the minute. So everything we do, there's no initiative we brought in that has been brought in without consulting the deaf community in any way, shape or form. In fact, most of what we do is realising the concepts that come from the deaf community, so we think that's quite a positive thing in that regard.
2.2, the definition of support. I know you've rejected our considerations on that.
Sorry, on the word, we're just trying to find the right place in our notes.
The classes.
2.2
is that definition of promotion. You don't believe that the definition of promotion. Has that been discussed with the deaf community? Because their idea of what promotion is and, in the general term is very different.
You will, and you're quite right there, but there's not one homogeneous group. You'll have a multitude of opinions, and a show of hands would have different ideas and concepts of promotion. What the point we're making is, through our chair and secretariat for that partnership group, is we have to arrive at an informed and corporate decision based on all the views available. So with regards to the drafting of the word promote, it's accepted premise that it's the dictionary definition that suffices here. And what we'd be concerned about is, if you give a definition of promotion, you narrow what can be achieved through primary legislation. And our view the whole time has been make it as wide as possible.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going through the list of things that you've given us. I wanted to move to that 3. It's a big one for me. Sorry, I'm just moving through. So under 3, that for the it's 3.2 for that avoidance of doubt. Things have slightly moved on, folks, and I'm going back to what the Minister had said in the House this week with regards to the launch of the disability strategy, and when he talked about people taking forward the outcomes of the strategy, he basically said that he would be looking for organisations, or prescribed organisations, to not see this as something that they should really be taking a lot of account of affordability into, because it should be something that they'd be targeting themselves to achieve. And I wondered, on the basis of his comments in the House, whether that has changed your opinion on the removal of 3.2b.
Gerard's going to speak to it, but what I would say is Minister cleared this information on Tuesday, the same day as he spoke in the House, so we've no reason to believe that there is a change of view has occurred in that intervening period. But Gerard can certainly speak to why we believe that needs to remain. If it's specifically about whether ministers had a change of heart, we're not aware of any such change of heart.
I think it's not so much a change of heart as why in this bill it specifically highlights affordability.
I could address that. I mean, we could have just left this in as reasonable as other pieces of legislation, as the DDA is reasonable. And reasonable takes account of affordability, as has been said. We've put other steps in here. So basically, if you look at the DDA, you only have to make that reasonable assessment. Now, if you're looking at what we've put in here, you have to look whether it's reasonable, and the request is reasonable, whether it's practical and affordable. So there's 3 steps that the public body will look at in doing this. A public body that stands now under DDA can just say it's unreasonable on affordability. Mm-hmm. If we're going to make a decision on this, we're going to say we've done everything we can, and the only reason we can't implement this is affordability. So it comes right down to money on that point. That's not the same approach you'll take under DDA. So in effect, we're putting additional jumps for the public prescribed organisation to consider. So we're looking at the reasonable steps, whether the request is reasonable, whether it's practical, and whether it's affordable. In effect, it extends what's in the reasonable case law. And what we're asking then is, so therefore, if you get a decision we can't provide this service, it'll be on if it's impractical, or it was unaffordable eventually, or for some other reason. In a DDA sort of situation with a reasonable, you're just saying it's unreasonable.
Yeah, but I don't know why, of all of the considerations of reasonableness, that affordability is spelt out in this way.
Well, affordability, in effect, in the situation we have at the minute, will be probably the least barrier. Practical ability will be the biggest barrier for us, and because we have a limited number of interpreters. So we've got to take it on that, because we want to progress this. So we want to find out how many times we weren't able to issue a service because it was impractical, or if there was a case, how many times it was unaffordable. So as we move forward in the 5-year review, we can look at where the barriers are coming up here,
That's not what's in the bill. The bill is saying that nothing in this section implies that a prescribed organisation are prevented from taking into account matters of affordability to them. It doesn't say that they have to provide a report.
No, but the 5-year report built into the legislation, that will look back over the last 5 years and see where things have worked and where things haven't worked.
I just think that this is a clause that's not required because it's already covered under 3.1. It's reasonable steps.
Basically, then you revert back to the reasonableness as sits in DDA, and we've had, there's been expressed that that's not the best approach to take this. What we're trying to do is an improved approach.
But it's the only approach that people will have to challenge.
The challenge in under any of these.
But has there been any consequential considerations made of this clause 3.2b being in here where it's explicit about affordability and the impact to anybody taking a case through DDA?
Yeah. No, but with DDA and affordability, you've got to remember...
Reasonableness is in DDA, so it does cover affordability.
But they're not connected. The DDA is a disability thing. This bill has nothing to do with disabilities. There's no linkage with the disability.
Hold on. I'm a person from the deaf community. I'm disabled by the fact that I am in the hearing. I don't have full hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go to, say, just for an example, to a benefits office and I can't see the person's face clearly to be able to lip read, and maybe I have to revert to sign language, and they say, no, we can't afford to provide that for you, I'm going after you on the DDA. I know you're saying this has nothing to do with the DDA, but as a deaf person, my only recourse is the DDA to challenge this.
The bill sets out clearly that this doesn't interfere with DDA. It actually says all those other rights. So in the situation you've described, you could progress that under DDA, but you could also progress it under this bill.
So, well, there's nowhere in this bill for me to progress it to. Where is the complaints and the monitoring and the handling of failures of prescribed organisations?
Each prescribed organisation within the Sign Language Action Plan will have to refer to its monitoring and complaints mechanisms.
Okay, yeah.
And with regards to the affordability, it is, as we've stated in the draft form of words that we intend to include within the guidance, that is an additional duty imposed upon prescribed organisations with the intent that they must keep documentation if they have refused an interpreter, and in 2025 there really should be no need for that, and that's the starting point. As to why it's unaffordable, is it due to the size of the organisation? Is there scope there, or is there a central contract which will take this issue away entirely? And it will make clear that they should keep all documentations if they've refused in case of a challenge. So in a sense it does present an additional duty, and I used the example last time of requests for the translation of a full website. I used the Assembly's own website, and that is, being you're talking, big money there, which is unaffordable even probably to the bigger organisations. So that puts it back in that context. And if, for example, the Assembly Commission say no, that's unaffordable, you make sure you have that well documented in case of a challenge, and that will be the guidance.
Which they will have through reasonable steps.
Mm-hmm.
So why have that? I just think that it's a clause that is reiterating something that's already there.
You're right, it is, Kelly, and 3.2 says for the avoidance of doubt, and it says no extra cost. We feel that's a really important thing to set down on the face of the bill, as well as convenience. And it also expressly, you're right, talks about affordability, but in 3.2b it also talks about practicability. So those elements are both enshrined in 3.2b. Absolutely, I take the point that we could rely on case law evolving on from DDA and other places what reasonable means in 3.1. We have taken the approach to set that out somewhat further in 3.2, and that was an approach that we evolved in combination with the draftsman.
Okay. Still not convinced, but no, thank you very much for that.
Okay, a couple of other ones I want to check with you then. Regarding Annex A, can I confirm whether the 3 pages with draft guidance as a heading is the guidance that you advised us BDA were working on? Iain, is that the same?
Is it you that what, sorry?
That BDA.
BDA have been what there are, and I know this has caused some confusion backwards and forwards, and we've been talking about the headings of the clauses and whether they could be made the titles could be made a little bit more self-explanatory. But under clause 6, there is what I would portray as more statutory guidance about how you must create a sign language action plan, for instance, and what reasonableness means, coming back to the conversation with Kelly. And then under 6.1b, best practice. And we have tried in this outline to say the sort of things we will see in A is the list of bullets on page 1, the meaning of reasonable steps, developing sign language action plans, etc. And here's an example of the text as we might see it, a draft. I think, taking Kelly's point, and a reference to explain how or not it fits with DDA and the DDA definitions would sit very comfortably in there, for example. And then the best practice guidance, bottom of page 2 in my version, the sorts of things we may put in there. The challenge we're having there, to be honest, is the drafts that we saw, which were quite lengthy, and even people in the deaf community were saying this is too long, started saying things like, and this is how you contact the sign language team in DFC, and this is their phone number. We really don't want that in regulations that have got to come through the Assembly. It doesn't make any sense. So we are actually still debating not all the material they've been developing, but how much will be sitting on a website that would be promoted, going back to that term, and how much would actually be in regulations that need to come through the Assembly. That is the debate we're having now that we've seen the full extent, which is why we didn't want to share the full extent with you, because we think a lot of it will become public domain best practice. Does the Sign Language Partnership Group have its own website, for instance? So this has a home that's neutral, if you want to call it that, compared to all the different groups. So yes, bottom of page 2, top of page 3 is the sort of types of things.
And that is welcome information. I suppose the more information we have, I suppose, just the more potential that may have to head off amendments in terms of reassuring committee. Will we be seeing any updated version of that within the next month before we come to given we're completing our stage in the early weeks of 2026?
I recognise that there's a challenge of timing here,
and new member staff. Yep.
I doubt it would be before your report, because of the processes and the way we need to make sure it's inclusive, and that we don't feel we've rushed it through with 1 or 2 deaf groups in a corner, as others might see it. So that's why we've tried to give you what we've given you, to give you a flavour.
Okay. In relation to draft amendments, do you have a timeline from OLC in terms of the text of the amendments the Department agreed to take forward? Because clearly we absolutely would like to have that before our informal clause by clause post-recess, very early post-recess.
It's slightly chicken and egg, if I may, Chair. It would be helpful for us to leave here today knowing precisely which amendments we are now getting instructed, or we are advising Minister to seek to instruct the draftsman on, and to inform other executive ministers of. The nature of those and the extent of those in drafting terms, that's why I say it's slightly chicken and egg. Our intention is to put a submission to Minister this afternoon or tomorrow with the agreed list of amendments, seeking his approval to instruct draftsman, a letter to executive colleagues, and for the draftsman to draft. If it is the list we think it is, that is a small matter. I'm not in any way belittling the focus the draftsman must put on that. If the list is different than we think we came in here with, so it would be very helpful to leave here understanding the list as it stands. But yes, we want you to have that, and the legislative guide says we need to get that. We don't think there's anything in here that needs to engage the executive, except for information purposes, not for approval purposes. We want to get this back to you. We know you've got a deadline of the middle of February to finish your report. That needs to be fully informed by a track change version or whatever one describes it as.
Okay, I just want to touch on Annex B, the list of prescribed organisations. Again, we do appreciate sight of the initial list. We have some concerns in relation to the organisations performing public character. For example, care homes was one of the things that have been raised as an example of that, and other organisations when you were here before. Does the Department have an update on where you are with that part of the list?
So this part of the list is in a way reasonably straightforward. It needs to be absolutely due diligence on it. We're looking at how we can future-proof it a bit, as it says a note there about could we say all Northern Ireland departments rather than list them if they adjust over time. So that is reasonably straightforward. And we need that quickly, as Gerard said earlier. As soon as the bill is enacted, we want to make those regulations so we can then do the engagement with those bodies to get the guidance done. It all rolls on from each other. On the public character, we are aware we have a question potentially about some parts of the educational sector, I'll put it that way, and the care homes. We have not yet had definitive engagement with the Department of Education on the first element of that, and we recognise the committee has been asking for that for some time. On the care homes, we have not yet had definitive engagement with Department of Health on that specific matter, although I'm looking at Tommy.
Yeah, the initial feedback from the Department of Health was that the RQIA and Health and Social Care Trust would provide governance management for care homes, and they would be content with that at the moment. But I can take your concerns back to them, certainly, and put it to them. But those were the initial thoughts of colleagues in the Department of Health, RQIA and Health and Social Care, particularly in those homes where there's public funding going into, and the RQA, of course, has oversight for.
And I am very conscious, and it may be the same point Kelly is looking at, because I've been going around with my mother-in-law, my wife and mother-in-law, looking at different care homes. There are those run by the Trust, which would fall in here, and there's one round the corner that's run privately, but many of the residents are funded by the Trust. I absolutely get that point. RQIA is making sure they are doing their health and related matters to standard. I'll just use that language. Sign language may or may not be embedded in that. It is an area for me that still has some wrinkles that need ironing out. We're at the stage of regulations would need to be brought forward, and in the proposals they would need to be draft affirmative regulations, which would allow debate in this room as well as in the chamber on things that are not there just as much as things that are there. Long-winded way, Chair, of saying we are still engaging with the relevant departments, and it appears to be education and health. We're not aware at this stage of any other department in play.
Well, RQA are, we believe, on the list, but NISC, Northern Ireland Social Care Council, may not be, and it may be a fairly relevant. NISC.
Northern Ireland Social Care Council is
It is.
I just happens to have relighted on it in the middle of the list.
Okay.
Regulation Quality Improvement Authority is here.
Is there, yeah.
We are needing to check the legal names of all of these. For instance, I know National Museums Northern Ireland is Museums and Galleries Northern Ireland in law. Hence, we need to do that piece.
Yeah, what I could say is, if any public body is left out, we can put them quickly on by negative. The other ones, we need to dot the I's and cross the T's before we make regulations around public functions.
Yeah. There may, just for information, be a typo. I think I've been advised in NI Assembly Commission, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Just as a point of information.
Northern.
Whereabouts? Sorry, Chair, whereabouts?
It's missing an E.
Missing an E on page 96 of your document. Of our pack.
Just after the ambulance.
I would like
trust.
to say we wanted to put in something to check the reading of it, but I can't get away with that.
There's
yes.
one, well, there's one for you for free.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank
I would make the point that these are just drafts.
Absolutely, no, listen, we're trying to be helpful, not to be critical. We're not being critical about that. Kelly, go ahead.
Just very quickly on the mention of RQIA. So if RQIA, and I appreciate you're going to bottom out some of this stuff, what I'm thinking of their role, what will their role be? Is that just to ensure that, say something like care home, is complying with the bill, or will they be providing training? Or
No, they're listing as a prescribed body, which will mean that they themselves, in their offices or in their engagements, need to comply with their sign language action plan and the regulations we make.
Yeah.
That is subtly different from their role of oversight of a set of a mixed bag of institutions of public character in the public sector, etc., etc. So it's their work. You might, Gerard took through the period products bill. That would be about if RQIA was on that list, that they had free period products in their offices, not to do with the areas they regulate.
Yeah. So they wouldn't be, they don't have any activities under this bill then to promote sign language, to the users of the service?
No.
Well, within a slot that's created by any prescribed organisation, if they want to put a line in about promotion, they're more than welcome to. I mean, it's you're not set. You don't have to. Well, one of the things we want to do is improve access here, and that is so. It's not always a yes and no answer. It's how can we do this better, and I think that has to come across in the guidance as well. It's just because there's going to be at times when we just can't. We have practical ability to improve interpretation, but we want to change how we approach that. Maybe communicating to deaf people on an earlier stage, so we can get interpreters in when needed. So these little nuances that we do in delivery throughout the public service. It's just changing how we approach everything in relation to sign language users.
So rather than being on the face of the bill, can I just double check then on the delegated powers memo? Will that be made very clear that for those organisations that they can, in their SLAP, include ways? I'm thinking about, you see, the RQIA with people who are in care homes, they make comment on the isolation and, you know, the things that can happen to people, so it sort of fits with them quite well if they wanted to promote sign language for, you know, customers of theirs or customers of their care homes. But I'm just wondering, is that going to be built in for the guidance?
I think that's the core of the guidance, because you can look at this as a yes or no answer. It's Social Security, you're entitled to it or you're not entitled to it, that sort of approach. But what we're looking at here is, no, let's change the dynamics. Yeah. Let's change how we approach things. Let's change how we communicate with deaf people. So by doing that, and this is the good thing about the guidance, where we identify improvements, then we can roll that out through guidance to everywhere. So it's building relationships with your deaf community, and that is as much as important as your affordability, your practicability and reasonableness, because we need to change the landscape.
And it's also one of the drivers for best practice and guidance, which will be embedded in each SLAP. So if the RQIA develop one, that will include best practice and promotion of how to deal with deaf signing residents, which isn't there at the moment.
And those who maybe need to to sign. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to think of that, the future planning of this. It's that promotion.
If I give you an example, during COVID, just as it hit, we had partnered with RNID and another voluntary trust to fund a scheme in nursing homes to promote deaf awareness and basic signing. So how to interact with isolated residents, then that was moved online as a result of COVID. So there are ways and means of doing that, and that was a pilot exercise, and that's the sort of things that best practice can build on, that each of the prescribed organisations can embed in their SLAP. And it also takes the administrative burden off listing 450 nursing homes who may not have deaf residents. So it caps that way. It's a practical solution to a difficult problem.
And we're open enough on this, you feel that it's going to address those people who are not yet using sign language but may need to rely on it?
I mean, a big part of what we do and what we fund down the years has been deaf awareness and sign language awareness. So the two of them go hand in glove.
Okay, looking around members, I don't think there's anyone else looking in at that point. So I want to thank you for attending today.
So, Chair, is it possible that we go away, we leave this room understanding what it is we're commissioning OLC to do?
We'll discuss that after you leave. Just we'll clarify that after you leave and send that on to you.
The sooner the better in terms of Minister's box closes next Tuesday until after recess, etc. So we've got some.
Let's not open up old wounds, Iain. We'll get it to you
in a very swift
fashion. You're even welcome to look at it on the televisions, but the committee.
My colleagues are, don't you worry.
But see, we'll get you a TV out there in the corner.
Right.
But listen, thank you for that. Thank you for your work on the bill, and I want to wish you and your families all a very happy Christmas. And we look forward to seeing you after Christmas again. Thank you. Thank you, Tommy.
My panlid, my apologies, it's somewhere down here. There it is.
Okay. Don't be hiding in there. We know you're still there. Okay, slam your file. Okay. Okay, members, thank you. So listen, I wanted to sort of just come to a number of items there to see have we committee consensus around some of the things that have been talked about repeatedly. We can then take in on board any other discussion we want to have. But there's a number of issues that I feel have been widely discussed by committee, and probably we have a degree of consensus on. Those are raising the age from 19 to 25.
Hold on, where are we at here with that?
This is just me pulling together. It's not necessarily in any of these documents. It's just me pulling together my observations over the course of a period of time. But if there's anything missing out of these, Kelly, you can.
It's just I'm trying to read through what you're talking about with their responses.
I'm talking in more general terms around issues they have said they will agree to look at, and the committee have appeared to be a consensus in committee. So raising the age from 19 to 25, updating the procedure for removing organisations from the list from a negative to a draft affirmative, members will recall. The issue around at least one person, to improving that. The laying of the report before the Assembly, which we had talked about last week, I think, or Tuesday. Reducing 5 to 3 years in terms of reporting periods. And changing procedure re-regulations for accreditation from negative to draft affirmative. Is there broad agreement within the committee that those are areas that we would like to see?
What was that last one?
Changing the procedure on regulations for accreditation.
Yeah.
So that's accreditation from negative to draft affirmative process. Are we agreed in principle that committee, there's a consensus in committee that we are seeking the department to make those amendments?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. Thank you, members. Okay. Now, just so I'll maybe check with the clerk now in relation to if there's any other issues. So obviously someone may or may not have committee consensus. In terms of timing and process, what's the next stage of this process, and when do we need to make any other agreements over and above those?
Well, immediately after Christmas recess, committee is scheduled to go into its informal clause by clause in the first week back, and then the second week back it's formal clause by clause, and then we're into the committee report.
Yeah.
So if there was committee consensus around any additional amendments, we would need to ask the bill clerk, or you wanted to take forward any that the bill clerk had provided, we'd need to know those by the first week back. So these are the ones that the department have said they're agreeable to, and they want clarity on to go and instruct OLC. If there's any in addition to that, we would need to agree those in the first week and back.
And it is very useful.
They would be for the committee to move or for individual members to move if there was not committee consensus.
It is to me very useful that we have this information in front of us over the recess period that people can go in within their own groups and or individually take a look at and see what your thoughts may be on those, and we can come back then at the first meeting back ready to have that informal clause by clause, and then the following week we're into the formal.
Yeah.
Members content with that process at this?
Are we not? We're just giving them the ones that we've agreed today.
That's the ones there's consistency.
They've sought clarity on for today.
If anybody else wants to seek consensus and anything further, you can start that today, or that can be done. You know, I would personally would like to be looking through them all and seeing where anything further might be.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to do that, or to.
I would love us to remove that 3.2b, but
I'm not entirely convinced about that yet. Just I'm weighing it up even from what they're saying today, and so
it's still no. After what Gordon said in the chamber the other day about the disability strategy, I'm going to use his words back at him again, because it's putting affordability above a person's need.
Yeah, and it may be the case that you decide to bring that, and then we'll have to consider it in that context again. But I think I'm very keen that we have strong consensus on the ones that we're looking at, so that we can, as a committee, row in behind those and get the strongest possible version.
Can I just thank the clerk staff for the amount of papers and the amount of work that have clearly went in to provide. Like, we have taken on board an awful lot of information in over the last few months, and I just want to say thank you to the clerk team and those who have put this together. It's incredible. It's really useful.
Thank you. I'll pass that on.
Thank you. Yeah, and I fully concur, Sean. Point well made. Okay, members, then I'm going to move on then to agenda item 10 with members' consent to forward work programme, a copy of which is at page 350. Do members have any comments, or are you content to note the forward work programme? Content, thank you. Members, can I draw your attention to our meeting on 12th of February 2026? We have scheduled in oral evidence from departments on the Children's Services Cooperation Act. Are members content that we also invite the Children's Law Society and Queen's University to brief the committee in relation to a joint event they held in November on the Act?
The Children's Law Centre.
Yeah, that's what. Who do you think it goes?
Children's Law Centre.
Law Centres.
Law Society.
You're right.
It should be centre. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. Well spotted, Sean. You're on your.
There's another organisation.
A whole organisation that we could be using out there. Yeah, thank you for that. Members content that we include those within that briefing? Thank you. Okay, agenda item 11. Any other business? Members?
Ever hold your peace.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. I was trying to look there in the forward work programme. Have we any space for NIFA coming in until after the sign language?
Well, what we do when members agree to take another briefing is move ones that were previously in. So, for example, for today's meeting, we previously had two sporting. There was a focus on sport. That all changed, so they've been moved out. So, if members have agreed to prioritise that, that's what we'll then do.
I think that does need to be. Yeah, and again, appreciate the work that all those wee agreements within committee do equate to a lot of work outside of the committee meeting. So, but I really do appreciate that, and I think that is a really important one. Okay, then, agenda item 12 then, members, date, time and location of the next meeting. Our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 8th of January 2026 in room 29 in Parliament Buildings here. As this is the last official committee meeting before Christmas recess, members, I would like to wish each and every one of you and all of the team here a very, very happy Christmas and a happy and peaceful New Year. I hope everyone gets a break over the Christmas period, because I do get a sense that it's going to get, if anything, even busier as time moves on. Some of that's negative and some of it's positive in that we're seeing things starting to come through in legislative terms and all of that. But I just want to say I've really enjoyed working with all of you throughout the year, and I welcome and appreciate your support, as has been the case with the clerk and all of our team. Great team, and please try to get a break over the Christmas recess. Gora Mila Mayagov Agus Nolik Hanadave Galar. Thank you.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee